Chapter 696, That Lady of Cining Palace. Filled with hatred, Lady Wang gritted her teeth so hard that she almost broke them, but that was all that she could do. Feng stared at Lady Wang. What have you been teaching her? It's all your fault that Feng Lu is like this. Lady Wang stared at Feng in disbelief. Damn you, Feng. What happened to calling her his perfect wife? It was as if Feng Lu was her responsibility alone. Feng said coldly, Feng Lu, since you failed the exam, you're grounded. You're not going anywhere for the next 3 months. He turned to Lady Wang after yelling at Feng Lu. You've been such a negligent mother. Go back now and reflect on yourself. Lady Wang was rendered speechless. She wanted to lash out, but had to show enough respect to her husband in front of others. She had no choice but to obey his order. And, Feng added in an indifferent tone, be polite to Xiao Wu from now on. She's the most respected figure in this clan. Lady Wang fell silent. You better not let me see you pick on Xiao Wu again. Humph. Feng flicked his sleeves in annoyance. Lady Wang gritted her teeth. Face twisted, she threw Feng Wu a dirty look before storming off. After Lady Wang and Feng Lu were gone, Feng said to Feng Wu in an affected, caring voice, Xiao Wu, don't hesitate to go to your aunt if you need anything. Come to me if she gives you trouble again. All right? Feng Wu found Feng's sycophantic manner despicable, but she smiled at him nonetheless. Of course, uncle. Good. Ha ha ha, good girl. Feng left, satisfied with Feng Wu's response. Granny Zhao shut the front gate after all the outsiders were gone. Ha ha ha, Chaoga was the first to burst out laughing. Xiao Wu, did you see the look on your uncle's and aunt's faces? I think their faces turned green. Ha ha ha. Feng Xiaoqi was equally delighted. They used to pick on us all the time, now they know what it feels like. My sister is amazing. Feng Wu gave them a wry smile. But I didn't do anything. You saved Lady Northern Feng, and she's doing everything for you. Chaoga looked at Feng Wu. Xiao Wu, Lady Northern Feng adores you and she'll treat you nicely. But that idiot Feng Sun. Humph. I'm gonna kick his ass if he tries to bully you. Feng Wu chuckled. Her silly brother Feng Sun was actually very easy to please. What Feng Wu didn't know was that Feng Sun was already showing off his new sister to everyone. In the Imperial Palace. The lady with the most authority in the palace wasn't Empress Dugu of Cunning Palace, but the Empress Dowager of Cining Palace. Although the old lady wasn't in the habit of actually running the palace, she was still well respected, for His Majesty was a dutiful son. Your Majesty, Her Majesty the Empress is here. At her age, the Empress Dowager got fatigued easily and had woken up late today. Granny Lan, the elderly maid, went up to the Empress Dowager and passed on the message in a low voice. The Empress Dowager rubbed her forehead, feeling a dull pain in her head. She waved the old maid off. Send them on their way. I don't want to see anyone today. Of course Granny Lan couldn't be that straightforward with the Empress. Instead, she smiled politely at Empress Dugu. Her Majesty the Empress Dowager isn't feeling too well today and prefers to have some time to herself. Your Majesty, ladies, please don't let me keep you here. The Empress Dowager was sick? Empress Dugu was concerned. Surely I should stay by Her Majesty's side if she's not feeling well. Ladies, leave us. The other imperial concubines had no choice but to obey. Chapter 697, My Dear Grandson. Empress Dugu was going to go in when Granny Lan stopped her. Her Majesty the Empress Dowager doesn't feel well and she prefers not to be disturbed. My apologies, Your Majesty. Granny Lan, am I an intruder now? Empress Dugu was displeased. Just then, footsteps came from outside. Granny Lan was a little dazed when she saw the teenager. She then forgot about Empress Dugu and hurried off after him. Your Royal Highness, I didn't know you were coming. Please come in. Her Majesty isn't feeling well and she's resting in bed. Jun Linyuan had been raised in Cining Palace and Granny Lan used to take care of him when he was little. He nodded at Granny Lan, then went straight in. Empress Dugu didn't like what she saw at all. I thought Her Majesty didn't want to see anyone. Why can he go in? Empress Dugu pointed at Jun Linyuan. That defiant son was so unbelievably arrogant, that she was his stepmother, but he wouldn't greet her or even so much as glance at her, let alone kneel down to show his respect. To him, she probably didn't even exist. The fact that Jun Linyuan had ignored her completely ruined Empress Dugu's day. She followed Jun Linyuan with her eyes, and hatred was written all over her face. Granny Lan smiled. His Royal Highness is never intruding. I'm sure your Majesty knows how Her Majesty the Empress Dowager dotes on the Crown Prince. She was right. The Empress Dowager, who was lying in bed, scrambled to her feet as soon as she was informed of Jun Linyuan's visit and rushed out to greet him. Your Majesty, it's chilly out there. Please take this robe. Ruishi, the chambermaid, chased after the old lady with a robe. The Empress Dowager, whom even Emperor Wu had to kneel down to greet, ran as fast as she could to welcome Jun Linyuan. Taking his hand, the old lady was elated. Oh my dear boy, there you are. Come, let me look at you. Have you lost weight? Jun Linyuan had an awkward look on his face. This was why he had chosen to make his residence outside the imperial palace when all his half-brothers hadn't. That this wasn't the first time Empress Dugu had witnessed such a meeting, but she still got jealous every single time. That the old lady was the Empress Dowager and the most influential woman in the empire, but to her, Jun Linyuan, whom she had brought up herself, was the only grandson that was worth doting on. That Empress Dugu still remembered. When Jun Linyuan was still living with the Empress Dowager, she couldn't help but bring her own son, the second oldest prince, over, so that the boy could somehow impress the old lady. And what did the Empress Dowager say? What's he doing here? To keep me company? But I have little Junjun for that. My little Junjun is better than 10 of your boy put together. Little Junjun doesn't like to have him around. Empress, keep a leash on your boy and don't let him near this palace. Little Junjun is upset. That old hag, that boy was little Junjun and her son was that boy. Jun Linyuan was better than 10 of her son put together. Her son should be kept out of this palace because little Junjun didn't like it. Those words almost gave Empress Dugu a heart attack. But what could she do? The Empress Dowager wasn't shy about showing her favoritism. The old lady had given Jun Linyuan everything, spoiling the kid. He was practically a fiend. Standing outside, Empress Dugu could still hear the conversation inside. Little Junjun, come here to Grandma. Oh my, why are you so skinny? Chapter 698, Jun Linyuan was bullied? Have you not been eating properly? Feng hasn't been doing his job, nor has Granny Gong. I knew it. Nowhere is as good as here. How about moving? Jun Linyuan had a hard time keeping a straight face as his grandmother babbled on. He took a deep breath to calm himself down. However, the old lady wasn't about to stop talking. She looked Jun Linyuan up and down and the concern in her eyes was genuine. Poor kid. You've reached the age to bed women, and all your negligent father can think of is getting more women into his bedchamber. Has he ever stopped to consider your needs? Don't worry. I've been on the lookout for you, and I'll send some nice girls to your residence. Jun Linyuan's face turned livid. No. He was just another defiant and willful teenager when he was with his grandmother. Their interactions were no different from that of any other grandparent and grandchild. If anything, the Empress Dowager only indulged her grandson more than anyone else. The Empress Dowager loved her grandson ardently. But you're old enough. At your age, your father was. I said no. 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 You never listened to me. Jun Linyuan lost his patience. Outside, Empress Dugu was delighted to hear this. Did Jun Linyuan have any idea who he was talking to? He was yelling at the most respected woman in the empire, someone even His Majesty had to give way to. But the Empress Dowager backed off right away. Of course. Whatever you say, my dear. That can wait. Actually, I think it's a little too early, too. It's all the Empress's fault. She's been nagging me about finding you a wife and I got carried away. The old lady looked at her grandson with pleading eyes. Read more chapter on novel full. Outside, Empress Dugu was speechless. Did the old lady know she was still outside? If so, what she said was deliberate and so frustrating. Jun Linyuan darted an annoyed look at his grandmother. I've told you, don't listen to that woman. Alright. My Junjun doesn't like her and I won't listen to her anymore. You know what? I think I should stop her from coming here, the Empress Dowager mumbled to herself. Empress Dugu didn't know what to say. What on earth had she done to deserve this? Jun Linyuan rose to leave a few moments later. Seeing that she couldn't keep him any longer, the Empress Dowager called out to her servants. It's cold outside. Lame, bring me that fur cape with golden feathers. It was a tribute from the kingdom of Wu. Chioshua, fetch me a hand warmer. Han Huang, quickly. However, Jun Linyuan was long gone before the Empress Dowager finished dressing for the cold weather. Empress Dugu snickered inwardly. That Jun Linyuan was outrageously unscrupulous just because the Empress Dowager doted on him. He had brushed off all Her Majesty's kindness. Empress Dugu was sure that the Empress Dowager would hold a grudge over that. After all, the Empress Dowager was never known for being a loving old lady. She pretty much ignored all her grandchildren apart from Jun Linyuan. However, Empress Dugu was disappointed. After Jun Linyuan went off without her, the Empress Dowager turned to Granny Lan. Junjun has lost weight and he looks unhappy. He must be keeping things from me. Is he being bullied? Empress Dugu wanted to scream. Bullied? Jun Linyuan. Everyone would say a silent prayer if that unruly crown prince didn't bully someone for a day. Him, bullied? The old lady must have lost her mind. However, the Empress Dowager didn't think that way, and she whined, sigh. He's always been a considerate boy. He only tells me the good things and hides the bad news, ever since he was little. I'm so worried that he's doing it again. By the way. Chapter 699, My Junjun is the best. By the way, bring little Asun to me. Junjun won't accept the guards I sent him, I have to ask Asun what's going on with my grandson. Granny Lan chuckled. Your Majesty, the Crown Prince is so talented, so capable, and so prestigious, who would dare bully him? In fact, who would be able to bully him even if they were bold enough? That's right. My Junjun is the best. There's never been and there never will be any kid as talented as he is. Yes, His Royal Highness is awesome. The Empress Dowager said proudly, awesome he is. I had his fortune told by that master from Wandering Temple. Junjun was born to rule this continent. He'll rise higher than anyone can imagine. The Empress Dowager was awesome in her own way. She had been groaning and moaning in bed, complaining about her headache. However, as soon as Jun Linyuan arrived, she was as good as new. She was practically glowing. However, as soon as Jun Linyuan was gone, gosh, my head hurts. Granny Lan was speechless. Granny Lan helped the old lady to her bed in a hurry. It's chilly out here. Your Majesty should really put on your cape before you get out of bed. Just then, footsteps came from outside. The Empress Dowager frowned and said impatiently, is the Empress still here? Just then, a crisp, loud voice sounded outside. Your Majesty, why are you sitting here? Her Majesty the Empress Dowager wouldn't let you in, is that it? After everything she heard the old lady say, Empress Dugu was already frustrated. She almost had a stroke. Lady Northern Feng, nice to see you. Empress Dugu feigned a friendly voice. How very unfortunate for you. Read more chapter on novel full. Why is that? Lady Northern Feng was in a good mood today and she smiled at Empress Dugu. The Empress smiled a little. Her Majesty the Empress Dowager isn't feeling well today and she's not receiving visitors. I'm afraid your ladyship has to leave. After that, the Empress sat back down with an impassive face, as if she hadn't been sitting there forever. Just then, the old lady's voice rang out inside. The Empress Dowager asked, "Is that Yaya out there?" Lady Northern Feng, aka Shi Yeren, was the orphan of a great general, and the Empress Dowager had raised the lady herself. The two of them were very close. Lady Northern Feng answered loudly, "Yes, Your Majesty. Your Yaya is here to see you." The Empress Dowager said, "What are you doing out there? You'll catch a cold. Come in." Darting an indifferent look at the Empress, Lady Northern Feng gave her a nod, rose to her feet, and walked in unhurriedly. Empress Dugu was exasperated. The emotionless mask she wore seemed to crack. That damn old hag. What happened to not receiving visitors? She kept letting people in. It was cold outside and Shi Yeren might catch a cold. She didn't seem to worry about the Empress getting sick. Empress Dugu was furious. She couldn't sit here forever. Empress Dugu rose to her feet. Seeing this, Granny Lan said loudly, "Her Majesty the Empress is leaving." Empress Dugu almost choked. Did they want to see her leave that badly? Empress Dugu felt so indignant that she decided she would stick around. She turned around and headed for the Empress Dowager's chamber. Granny Lan couldn't exactly stop Empress Dugu, and could only turn to the Empress Dowager for help. The Empress Dowager was chatting with Lady Northern Feng, and her face darkened when she heard that the Empress was still here. Lady Northern Feng found it most amusing. Chapter 700, So Biased. People said that old people were like little children, and the Empress Dowager was exactly that. She let everything show on her face. Lady Northern Feng said, "Her Majesty the Empress is your daughter-in-law, she's just trying to fulfill her duty." The Empress Dowager was persuaded. She turned to Granny Lan. "If she wants to come in so badly, let her in." Finally, Empress Dugu was able to enter her mother-in-law's bedchamber. But the Empress Dowager didn't even look at her after she walked in. The old lady simply went on chatting with Lady Northern Feng. The Empress Dowager said cheerfully, "Yaya, you know what? Junjun was here." Lady Northern Feng looked at the Empress Dowager with a gentle smile on her face and listened patiently. What the old lady needed was an audience. When the Empress Dowager finally finished talking about Jun Linyuan, she said aggrievedly, "He's the only crown prince that has his residence outside the imperial palace." Empress Dugu vented her sarcasm inwardly, that he was. Lady Northern Feng smiled. "His Royal Highness has been a strong-minded child since he was little. I'm sure he has his own reasons for moving out. Maybe it's better for his cultivation, or he didn't want to put too much pressure on his younger siblings." The Empress Dowager clapped her hands. "You're right. He must have moved out to ease the pressure on his younger brothers and sisters. You know how the Empire's kids are. Apart from Junjun, the others are all. Read more chapter on novel full." She then looked up and saw Empress Dugu. Empress Dugu thought since she was already here, the old lady would at least show her some respect. But she overestimated how willful the old lady could be. The Empress Dowager rolled her eyes at Empress Dugu. "What are you staring at me for? It's not like your son is any better." Empress Dugu thought she was going to have a stroke. She began to doubt her decision to come here. The old lady was obviously having fun criticizing her. Empress Dugu nearly stormed off. Just then, footsteps came from outside. Lady Northern Feng looked bewildered. The Empress Dowager said grumpily, "It has to be my son." And she was right. Emperor Wu showed up shortly afterward. As a middle-aged man, Emperor Wu was as stalwart as ever. He looked as powerful as he was authoritative. However, to the Empress Dowager, he was nothing but an obedient son. "Your Majesty, I'm here to check up on you." Emperor Wu came in with a broad smile on his face. He beamed at Empress Dugu when he saw her. "The Empress is here as well." That's very considerate of you. The Empress Dowager snorted. She was no fool. That narrow-minded Empress would never have stayed if she didn't know that the Emperor were coming. Your Majesty. Lady Northern Feng greeted Emperor Wu. Lady Northern Feng and Emperor Wu grew up together under the Empress Dowager, and the two of them were closer than blood siblings. Emperor Wu was very happy to see Lady Northern Feng. Why, Yaya's here. I know you're busy with running the mansion and everything, but you really should come more often. My mother is lonely here and she'll be happy to see you. Lady Northern Feng smiled. Her Majesty the Empress is here to keep her company as well. The Empress Dowager grunted. She's so dumb. I'd be blessed if she doesn't upset me. Keep me company? No, thanks. Empress Dugu was infuriated. Chapter 701, A Favor. Empress Dugu just didn't get it. Every time she was here, she was busy serving the Empress Dowager tea or giving her a shoulder massage. She worked as hard as a chambermaid, but what did her mother-in-law say? She called her dumb. On the other hand, all Jun Linyuan and Lady Northern Feng had to do was sit around and the Empress Dowager was over the moon. Could the old lady be any more biased? Feeling so aggrieved, Empress Dugu tugged at the Emperor's sleeve and looked at him with teary eyes. Emperor Wu took the hint right away. He patted his wife on the shoulder. There. You'll get used to it. Empress Dugu was baffled. After everything she had been put through, he told her to get used to it. Was that how he comforted people? What was wrong with this family? The Empress Dowager never thought much of Empress Dugu and the old lady completely ignored the Empress's reaction. Although, she was happy to see her son, the Emperor. They all sat down and chatted together like they used to before Lady Northern Feng got married. However, to Empress Dugu's frustration, she couldn't contribute to the conversation at all. It excluded her from the family, and soon, she was left out. Ha ha ha, Emperor Wu laughed heartily when they recalled the old days. Yaya was so tough back then. She was only a little girl when she punched that assassin in the face. The guy was petrified. This violent girl just came out of nowhere. Ha 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 ha, the Empress Dowager laughed until she was in tears. You don't say. Yaya was such an unruly girl that I was so worried. Luckily, she's much more ladylike now, but it's Asun's turn to run around like a wild bear now. Lady Northern Feng chuckled. He's hopeless. I took in a goddaughter the other day and he almost ruined it. A goddaughter? Yaya, you have a goddaughter now. Who's the kid? The Empress Dowager was surprised. So was Emperor Wu. Read more chapter on novel full. Lady Northern Feng herself was the Empress Dowager's goddaughter, and the old lady treated her like her own. I forgot to mention it, didn't I? Lady Northern Feng smacked her own forehead. I'm actually here today to talk about that. Empress Dugu was also taken by surprise. A goddaughter? Lady Northern Feng was such a proud woman that she bowed to no one but the Empress Dowager and the Emperor. Who could be good enough for her? Lady Northern Feng gloated. It's not official yet. I can't do it so casually. She's going to be my daughter and I'm going to pick an auspicious date, gather all my family and friends, and announce it in front of everyone. That's serious? Emperor Wu and the Empress Dowager exchanged looks. Yaya meant it. Who's the girl? The Empress Dowager and her son looked at Lady Northern Feng curiously. Instead of answering directly, Lady Northern Feng turned to Emperor Wu. Your Majesty, may I ask a favor? What? Lady Northern Feng said cheerfully, if she were my own daughter, she would be a princess, right? Of course, the Empress Dowager said matter-of-factly. Your daughter can't be anything less. I'll do you the favor if the Emperor won't. Lady Northern Feng grinned. Your Majesty, would you make my goddaughter a princess? Chapter 702, Could It Be? 1. Empress Dugu looked at Lady Northern Feng in disbelief. His Majesty hadn't even met this girl yet and he knew nothing about her. How could he make her a princess that casually? What on earth did Lady Northern Feng think a princess was? However, to Empress Dugu's frustration, Emperor Wu said, "Yaya, it's so rare that you think so highly of someone. If this girl is good enough to be your goddaughter, of course I'll grant your wish. I'll make her a princess however you see fit." "And could you make her a princess with a title?" Lady Northern Feng pushed her luck. The princesses came in 3 ranks. Daughters of royal princes were of the highest status and were given the title Heshua. Daughters of male cousins of the emperor had the second highest status. After that were daughters of the non-royal families, such as Mu Yaoyao. And Lady Northern Feng wanted to make Feng Wu a Heshua princess. Emperor Wu was very generous with his family. With a wave of his hand, he said, "Of course. She's going to be my niece, I'll give her only the best. If she's really as wonderful as you say, I'll make her a royal princess. Brother Emperor Wu, you're the best." Lady Northern Feng hardly ever addressed the emperor that way, for she found it rather silly. However, she couldn't help but clap her hands cheerfully now. She seldom offered Emperor Wu excessive praise, and when she did, it was such a pleasant surprise for him. He enjoyed them a lot. On the other hand, Empress Dugu wouldn't stop showering Emperor Wu with such expressions over and over again that the emperor had gotten sick of them. While Emperor Wu was secretly mocking Empress Dugu for how cloying she could be, the empress was stewing in her own anger. Read more chapter on novel full. A princess? And a princess of the highest status? And potentially a royal princess? He wouldn't make that girl a Heshua princess, would he? Even Jun Wuxia, her own daughter, hadn't been given the title Heshua yet. What on earth was he thinking? Empress Dugu gritted her teeth until they crunched. She then took a deep breath to hide the jealous look on her face and said with a smile, "I'm so curious. What kind of girl is it who can win Lady Northern Feng's heart?" The Empress Dowager and Emperor Wu both looked at Lady Northern Feng curiously. Lady Northern Feng said, "That girl is brilliant. She's so good in her studies that I can say that she's second only to Junjun in this empire." "Really?" Emperor Wu's face lit up. Empress Dugu snorted inwardly. What a braggart. If the girl was that good, how come no one had heard of her before? Lady Northern Feng knew nothing of what was going on in Empress Dugu's head and she went on in a cheerful voice, "Plus, my daughter is an amazing doctor. She's a miracle worker, if you ask me. There's no disease she can't cure, and I think she's as good as old Master Ba was back in the day." Empress Dugu couldn't stand it anymore and feigned an inane smile. "Isn't she just a young girl? How can she be old Master Ba's equal?" "I'm gonna tell you what happened," Lady Northern Feng said proudly. "I got sick a while ago. It didn't seem that serious, but I was gravely ill. I almost died." "That's serious?" The Empress Dowager was concerned and she took Lady Northern Feng's hand immediately. "How are you feeling now? Are you alright? Do I need to worry?" The Empress Dowager genuinely cared for Lady Northern Feng, whom she had raised herself. "I almost died the night before last. It was all thanks to that kid that I'm still alive. Your Majesty, you could have lost me, if it wasn't for her." Empress Dugu interjected in a tone dripping with acid. The girl couldn't have planned the whole thing, could she? Chapter 703, You're Not Having This Daughter. Lady Northern Feng flared up. "What are you suggesting? Xiao Wu would never run such a scam. She's simply an amazing doctor." Empress Dugu turned to her husband with an aggrieved look on her face. However, the Empress Dowager was persuaded. She turned to Lady Northern Feng. "Yaya, don't let her trick you." Lady Northern Feng was speechless. She didn't reply, but only threw a dirty look at Empress Dugu. Satisfied with the effect of her question, Empress Dugu went on, "Which family is the girl from? What's her name? We really should run a background check on her to see what kind of person she really is. After all, if she becomes your daughter, she'll be a part of this family." The Empress Dowager found those words reasonable. She frowned and turned to Lady Northern Feng. Yaya, what's her name? She's Feng Wu, and she's a bright, pretty girl. I'll bring her here someday. Lady Northern Feng had great confidence in Feng Wu. Feng Wu? Emperor Wu was taken aback. Which Feng Wu? Empress Dugu's stomach lurched as well. After all, that name was unforgettable to the royal family. The fifth daughter of the Feng clan. It's her. The look in Emperor Wu's eyes was indecipherable. Read more chapter on novel full. Empress Dugu cried out, it can't be. Feng Wu. As in the girl who was once engaged to Jun Linyuan. Lady Northern Feng frowned. Empress Dugu didn't stop there. Your Majesty, didn't that Feng Wu lose all her abilities? She was a genius, but she's crippled now. It's that Feng Wu. The Empress Dowager frowned and she glared at Lady Northern Feng. Yaya, that was very rash of you. But... Lady Northern Feng was about to explain, but the Empress Dowager cut her off. You're not having this goddaughter. Lady Northern Feng looked at the Empress Dowager in disbelief. But why? Empress Dugu interjected in a timely manner, Lady Northern Feng, don't you know? His Royal Highness cancelled his marriage contract with her not just because she was crippled. The main reason was how she became that way. The Empress Dowager even nodded in agreement. Empress Dugu hardly ever received such recognition and was thrilled. Feng Wu became too greedy and messed up during practice. That was what crippled her. Being greedy is never a merit, especially in our family. We should always accept our position in life and never ask for too much. The Empress Dowager nodded with a solemn look on her face. Lady Northern Feng lost her temper. Since when is my Xiao Wu greedy, and who are you to say, accept your position in life? If so, why do you meddle in my business? Stick your nose somewhere else. Seeing that Lady Northern Feng and the Empress were going to start a row, the Empress Dowager intervened. Yaya, are you going to defy me now? But... Forget about this goddaughter thing. It never happened. Lady Northern Feng was exasperated. Her Xiao Wu was the best. She was pretty, smart, and considerate. She was perfect. Why couldn't the Empress Dowager see it? Junjun doesn't like her. He'll be upset if you have her as a daughter. The Empress Dowager grunted. That was it. Whether Feng Wu was greedy or not, the Empress Dowager couldn't care less. Jun Linyuan was her top priority and she didn't want to upset him. Chapter 704, Bring her to me now. But, as her new cousin, Junjun already gave her a gift. Lady Northern Feng announced the breaking news. What? The Empress Dowager was shocked. Empress Dugu didn't see that coming. Someone so puffed up with arrogance would give a welcome gift? How had that happened? Junjun really did that? Yes. What did he give her? Lady Northern Feng said, the piece blessed by the Master of Wandering Temple. That jade pendant? The Empress Dowager's mouth fell open. He gave the jade to that girl? Yes. No. The Empress Dowager shook her head. Quickly, take it back. We have to take it back. Lady Northern Feng was bewildered. What did I miss? A lot. The Empress Dowager was going to elaborate, when she saw the eager look on Empress Dugu's face. She snorted instead. It's a long story. Just take it back. Lady Northern Feng said, but Junjun offered her the gift himself. Wouldn't it offend him if we take it back now? The Empress Dowager hesitated. That kid really had a very big ego. But the news worried her so much, for she had been there when the Master of Wandering Temple gave Jun Linyuan that jade pendant, with a speech about some promise, of two people brought together by fate, and a love that was meant to be love for 3 lifetimes. The Empress Dowager didn't understand much, nor could she remember it clearly. She only knew that the jade was connected to Jun Linyuan's fate and couldn't be given to just some random person. You, the Empress Dowager turned to Lady Northern Feng. Bring that girl to me. I want to talk to her myself. With a straight face, the Empress Dowager was exactly what the most authoritative woman in the empire should look like. Lady Northern Feng sighed inwardly. She couldn't understand how things had turned out like this. Tomorrow. I won't wait that long. The Empress Dowager's voice was emotionless and solemn. I want to see her now. She wanted to see what kind of girl could swindle her little Junjun out of that jade pendant. Seeing the intimidating look on the Empress Dowager's face, Empress Dugu gloated inwardly. Finally, Lady Northern Feng was going to learn her lesson. So what if the Empress Dowager was nice to her? To the old lady, Jun Linyuan was the most precious person in the whole world. Anyone who posed the slightest threat to him could be punished with death. It then occurred to Empress Dugu that since the old woman thought so highly of Jun Linyuan, as the crown prince's stepmother and the mother of another royal prince, she really shouldn't feel happy at all. Instantly, Empress Dugu felt very conflicted. The Empress Dowager turned to Granny Lan. Go fetch me that Feng Wu now. Lady Northern Feng rose to her feet immediately. That girl didn't know what was going on and Granny Lan would probably make her nervous. That won't be necessary, Lady Northern Feng stopped Granny Lan. I'll go. I'll bring her here. Your Majesty, please don't be mad. Humph. Apparently, the old lady was still mad. After leaving Cining Palace, Lady Northern Feng rubbed her forehead. Nothing had gone as planned. The Feng clan. Feng Wu was at Grand Secretary Feng's house and was busy with the formation. Because of the secrecy, Feng Wu had to take care of every inch of the formation herself. Thanks to her talent in formations, Feng Wu finished in a day what could take someone a year to do. Even Grand Secretary Feng was amazed. Chapter 705, A Group Interrogation. Feng Wu said, "We'll build the foundation first. After the underground formations are complete, I'll make some partial changes based on the structure of the manor. The minor formations can wait till the end." Minor formations? Such as a small formation centered around the dry well, or a mini one like what I did with that whistling vase. They'll all join up and become part of the completed Tai formation. Feng Wu wiped the sweat from her forehead. Building the Tai formation was a lot of work, but she was enjoying every minute of it. For one, she could put the theories she had learned from her beautiful master to use. The more she practiced, the more impressed she was by how knowledgeable her beautiful master was. Grand Secretary Feng had lost count of how many times Feng Wu's knowledge of formations had amazed him. For another, once the formation was completed, it would help Feng Wu and those around her. And it wasn't limited to their cultivation, the formation would also help to extend the lives of ordinary people. Lady Northern Feng arrived at Fallen Star Yard at that moment. Hearing the noise, Feng Wu said goodbye to Grand Secretary Feng. Lady Northern Feng, what brings you here? Because the goddaughter thing wasn't official yet, Feng Wu still addressed the lady like she normally did. Lady Northern Feng felt guilty when she saw Feng Wu. She opened her mouth, but didn't know what to say. What happened? Feng Wu could tell something was wrong. It had to be something major to trouble the dauntless Lady Northern Feng like this. Xiao Wu, taking Feng Wu's hand, Lady Northern Feng smiled bitterly. I'm so sorry about this. It's all my fault. Read more chapter on novel full. Someone at court didn't agree with you? Those people were the only ones Feng Wu could think of that could make Lady Northern Feng feel helpless. Lady Northern Feng was surprised by how perceptive Feng Wu was. Since you've guessed it, I'll tell you everything. Lady Northern Feng had faith in Feng Wu's character and she told Feng Wu about everything that had happened in the Imperial Palace. She gave the girl a wry smile in the end. Xiao Wu, what do you think we should do now? She added, I went to the Crown Prince's residence first, but His Royal Highness wasn't there, and neither was Feng. No one knew when they would be back. No problem. I'll come with you. Feng Wu smiled. That was how big-heart Feng Wu was. She always took the bull by the horns and wouldn't be intimidated. In the Imperial Palace. Emperor Wu tried to say something a few times, but decided not to in the end. With the Empress Dowager sitting there with a long face, the atmosphere was very tense in the hall. She was nursing a headache. The Empress Dowager felt a throbbing pain behind her eyes and she thought she could see flashing lights. However, at the thought of that jade pendant, she willed herself to sit straight. Because of that, she was in an even fouler mood. No one made a sound in Cining Palace. The servants tried their best to keep their footsteps as quiet as possible. The Empress Dowager seemed to be this kind old lady, but when she did get mad, there would be blood. It had always been this way in the Jun family. The Empress Dowager was like this, and so were Emperor Wu and Jun Linyuan. Quick footsteps came from outside. Lady Northern Feng skipped the announcement and brought Feng Wu into the palace straight away. The mood in the palace was very solemn and the air seemed to have frozen. Dressed in her formal attire with a golden crown on her head, the Empress Dowager sat there with an emotionless and stern face. Next to the Empress Dowager, Emperor Wu looked equally majestic. Chapter 706, Fainted. Empress Dugu tried to keep a straight face, but she failed to hide the cheerful look in her eyes. It was an interrogation. That was the first thing that came to Feng Wu's mind when she walked in. Your Majesties. Feng Wu bowed instead of kneeling. That gesture alone displeased the Empress Dowager. Oh my, what an arrogant noble young lady. She doesn't even kneel to the Empire and the Empress Dowager. The Empress Dowager smirked. After Lady Northern Feng left, Empress Dugu took the chance to spread more rumors about Feng Wu. Why did she know those things? Well, Empress Dugu and Zhou Qingluan were students of the same master. As a matter of fact, Empress Dugu had put in a lot of effort to make Zhou Qingluan a student of Firmament Palace. What she said made the Empress Dowager dislike Feng Wu even more, and the old lady was furious to see that Feng Wu wouldn't kneel. Feng Wu smiled bitterly to herself at the old lady's rage. Back when she was still a genius, she hadn't had to kneel to the Empress Dowager. But the old lady hadn't seemed to be offended then. Your Majesty, to what do I owe this honor? Feng Wu tactfully switched the subject. I was told that you had a jade pendant. The Empress Dowager cut to the chase. Read more chapter on novel full. Yes. It was a gift? Yes. What if I told you to hand it over to me? The Empress Dowager's eyes shone coldly. Your Majesty, I'm your petty subject, I'll always obey your order. Lowering her head, Feng Wu put the jade pendant on both palms and raised it over her head. That surprised everyone. It was a gift from His Royal Highness, and other people could only dream to even touch it. How could she give it up just like that? Staring at the jade pendant, the Empress Dowager didn't know whether to flare up or rejoice. She rejoiced that she was able to retrieve the jade. But she was angry at how little the girl thought of a gift from Junjun. All of a sudden, the Empress Dowager felt as if a bomb had gone off in her head. She cried out and pressed both hands to her head. Cold sweat trickled down her face. Empress Dugu was the first to react. She pointed at Feng Wu. How dare you? Her Majesty has fallen ill because of you. You're dead if anything happens to Her Majesty. Take her and lock her up. All hell broke loose in the hall. For the Empress Dowager was shaking from head to toe. White foam gathered at the corners of her mouth, her eyes rolled back, and it looked very serious. Meanwhile, two guards rushed toward Feng Wu. Feng Wu's eyes glinted. If she let them take her, it was very likely that the Empress Dowager wouldn't make it. If the old lady died, Feng Wu would be in great trouble. Feng Wu knew that Lady Northern Feng wouldn't set her up. So, this was her unlucky day. Saving the Empress Dowager would be saving herself. At that thought, Feng Wu shoved the two guards away, and the next second, she was by the Empress Dowager's side. She bellowed, "Don't panic. Back off. Give Her Majesty some air." After that, Feng Wu pushed with both hands. Thump. The maids gathered around the old lady were all brushed aside. Feng Wu's tone was very authoritative. So much so that the others didn't have time to react before they were pushed away. Even Granny Lon fell to the ground. You! Empress Dugu was furious. Chapter 707, Take Feng Wu. Take her. Take Feng Wu down. She wants to kill Her Majesty the Empress Dowager. Lady Northern Feng was infuriated. Damn that Empress Dugu. That woman was always trying to stir things up. Lady Northern Feng moved before she could think. She slapped Empress Dugu. Shut the fuck up. Wow, that everyone was dumbfounded. OMG. That was the Empress. The wife of the Emperor. Empress Dugu of the famous Dugu clan. And Lady Northern Feng had just slapped her. Even Empress Dugu herself was baffled and she stared at Lady Northern Feng in disbelief. How? How dare you hit me? Lady Northern Feng brushed her aside. Her Majesty is in grave danger and you're only thinking about taking personal revenge. Is that what an Empress should do? I don't have time for this. His Majesty can punish me however he wants after Her Majesty is saved. One more word and I'll kill you. Lady Northern Feng glared at the Empress when she said the last few words. Her tone was as bone-chilling as the look in her eyes. Empress Dugu's stomach lurched. She hated Lady Northern Feng, but she knew perfectly well that if she kept bickering with Lady Northern Feng, even her husband wouldn't take her side. Emperor Wu, the filial son, could no longer think straight when he saw the condition the Empress Dowager was in. He was at a loss over what to do. Where are the imperial physicians? Fetch Master Chu. Emperor Wu yelled. The maids and eunuchs all rushed out to look for Master Chu. Meanwhile, Feng Wu had taken out a row of silver needles. Whoosh! With the needles in her right hand, Feng Wu removed the Empress Dowager's robe with her left hand. What are you doing? Emperor Wu glared at Feng Wu with a murderous look on his face. Any other person would be quivering under the pressure and lose their composure. Feng Wu only looked at Emperor Wu and stated the facts in a level tone. Her Majesty is gravely ill at the moment. If I don't do anything, she'll be dead in 3 minutes. I can buy her an additional 15 minutes. Your Majesty, it's up to you now. Although the old lady didn't like her, Feng Wu had to do something for her own sake. Moreover, Feng Wu knew that Jun Linyuan was close to the old lady. If he knew that Feng Wu refused to help his grandmother, she would be in a lot of trouble. Chest heaving, Emperor Wu was astonished by Feng Wu's words. 3 minutes? Yes. 2 minutes and 50 seconds now. You, his mother was convulsing on the floor. Can you promise you can save her? Lady Northern Feng rushed over before Feng Wu could reply. She stared at Emperor Wu. Sure Yeren, swear on my life. If Feng Wu fails to save Her Majesty, you can cut my head off. Emperor Wu kept his gaze on Lady Northern Feng. 1 minute, Feng Wu reminded him in a calm voice. Emperor Wu gritted his teeth. Master Chu still hadn't shown up, and if they waited any longer. Fine. I'll have your head on a plate if you can't save my mother. Hardly had Emperor Wu finished his sentence when Feng Wu stuck the silver needles into the old lady. She used 18 needles in total from the old lady's head to her abdomen. It took Feng Wu less than 3 seconds to work all the needles in. That skill alone was enough to baffle Emperor Wu. Then, Feng Wu flipped her right hand up and a dot of pale green light appeared in her palm. Chapter 708, So Strange. Feng Wu tapped the old lady's forehead with her index finger. The pale green light scattered before disappearing into the Empress Dowager's body. It was just that the process had been blocked from sight by Feng Wu's wide sleeve, and no one else had seen it. Afterward, Feng Wu removed all the silver needles from the Empress Dowager, disinfected them, and packed them back up before putting the bundle back into her sleeve. She then steadily rose to her feet and nodded calmly at Emperor Wu. Emperor Wu had kept his gaze on the Empress Dowager the entire time. To his amazement, he saw that the old lady, who had been convulsing and twitching, had really quieted down. Apart from her closed eyes and her pale face, she actually looked all right. Emperor Wu stared at Feng Wu. She's not awake. Why have you stopped? Feng Wu raised an eyebrow. Your Majesty, do you still require my service? That question almost gave Emperor Wu a heart attack. What kind of doctor would stop in the middle of treatment to ask that question, not to mention that she was treating the Empress Dowager? That girl was audacious to the extreme. What's wrong with Her Majesty the Empress Dowager? Emperor Wu glared at Feng Wu. Feng Wu gave it some thought before asking the Emperor, Your Majesty, would you like to hear the truth, or? Emperor Wu didn't know what to make of that question. Of course I want the truth. Do you know how serious this is? Feng Wu sighed. The truth is, Her Majesty has a ruptured cerebroma caused by chronic nephritis and hypertension. Ha! Emperor Wu was dumbfounded. Those words sounded familiar, but put together, he had no idea what that phrase meant. And he wasn't the only one baffled. What was that? Everyone eyed each other in bewilderment. Before Feng Wu could explain, hasty footsteps came from outside. Granny Lan dragged Master Chu into the hall so forcefully that she tore his robe. Quickly, Granny Lan pushed Master Chu into the room. Everyone was speechless. Master Chu's forehead was covered with sweat when he ran into the hall in his unkempt clothes. He looked up, saw Emperor Wu, and was going to kneel. Emperor Wu glowered. Cut the crap and help Her Majesty. He had already moved his mother onto the bed. All right. Master Chu went to check her pulse. However, the look on his face kept getting stranger, and in the end, he even looked glad. It took him 15 minutes to finish checking her pulse. Emperor Wu asked eagerly, How's Her Majesty doing? Master Chu looked conflicted. He seemed to want to say something, but hesitated. What do you know? Speak. Emperor Wu frowned at Master Chu and he sounded disgruntled. His mother was still lying there, unconscious. Your Majesty. After some thought, Master Chu said, in simple terms, Her Majesty suffers from high blood pressure caused by chronic nephritis, which led to this cerebral hemorrhage. Emperor Wu said, You mean a ruptured cerebroma caused by chronic nephritis and hypertension? Yes. That's it. Master Chu nodded repeatedly. Cerebroma, that's exactly what that blood clot is. Your Majesty, that's the most accurate summarization. That's exactly it. Emperor Wu glanced at Feng Wu. That girl really knew her stuff. Master Chu said, What happened to Her Majesty was very sudden and very serious. However, the unusual thing is that. Chapter 709, That Master. What's your conclusion? Emperor Wu stared at Master Chu. Master Chu said, Her Majesty has a cerebroma which ruptured due to chronic nephritis and hypertension, and it was an acute attack. The common symptoms include nausea, vomiting, headache, convulsions, and it's usually lethal within 5 minutes. From what I can detect, the aneurysm in Her Majesty's brain should have put her in a critical condition, but Her Majesty was able to hold on for over 20 minutes. Moreover, she's not vomiting or convulsing. Master Chu looked bemused. I don't understand. I've been doing this for so many years and something like this shouldn't have happened. There must be another explanation. While Master Chu was still pondering the question, all the others had turned to look at Feng Wu. Empress Dugu's face was livid. What Master Chu said indirectly proved what a wonderful doctor Feng Wu was. Had it not been for Feng Wu's treatment, the Empress Dowager would be dead by now. She did it. She actually did it. Clenching her fists, Empress Dugu gritted her teeth. She was considering writing Zhuo Qinghuan a letter after returning to her bedroom. Emperor Wu glanced at Feng Wu at that moment as well. He cleared his throat. Someone treated Her Majesty before you arrived. That explains everything. Master Chu clapped his hands. Yes. That explains why Her Majesty is still safe and sound after her aneurysm. That person is so amazing. Are they? Master Chu looked excited. Yes, of course. That person is a spectacular doctor. If I've guessed right, their skills are much more advanced than mine. Instantly, a hush fell over the hall. Everyone looked at Feng Wu in silence. According to Master Chu, Feng Wu was a better doctor than he was. How was that even possible? Master Chu turned to Emperor Wu. Your Majesty, where's that master? That person should be the one treating Her Majesty now. The others were dumbfounded. You're Master Chu, the best imperial physician we've got. How are we supposed to go to someone else when you're here? Emperor Wu stared at Master Chu with a livid face. Are you telling me you can't help Her Majesty? Medicine refiners were so prestigious that even Emperor Wu couldn't lash out at them at will. He could only express his anger with a livid face. Master Chu smiled bitterly. Your Majesty, Her Majesty the Empress Dowager has an ailment in her brain, and we need to extract that clot as soon as possible without damaging the brainstem. None of my people can perform such a delicate operation. As for myself, well, I could certainly try, but I only stand a 50-50 chance. However, Your Majesty might have heard, I'm working my way up to the supreme level, which has used up much of my spiritual essence. I'm afraid I only have a 20% chance of saving Her Majesty. 20%? Master Chu would never dare try it on the Empress Dowager. Even if he did, Emperor Wu wouldn't allow it. Master Chu smiled in resignation. Therefore, Your Majesty, we better leave the job to that master. They'll do wonders. Is that person that good? Emperor Wu glanced at Feng Wu. She was just a slim 13-year-old girl. Was she really that great a doctor? Even if she started from birth, she would only have had 13 years of practice. Yes. That good. Master Chu said in a serious tone. He then began to praise this master. Chapter 710, Impossible. Master Chu sighed in amazement. I admire that persons so much because they were able to stop the rupture with acupuncture alone. Moreover, they stopped Her Majesty's internal energy from running amok and guided it into her brain to restore balance. How spectacular! That's something I'll probably never be able to do. Emperor Wu couldn't help but dart another look at Feng Wu. That girl was such an amazing doctor. He hadn't known that before. Your Majesty, who on earth is this master? Master Chu asked eagerly. With what they've done so far, they have at least a 60% chance of saving Her Majesty. She still needs saving. Emperor Wu stared at Master Chu. Master Chu nodded. That's right, Your Majesty. The Empress Dowager is still in grave danger and we need that master's expertise again. Otherwise, I'm not sure Her Majesty will survive this. All eyes were on Feng Wu now. If Master Chu was telling the truth, Feng Wu was a shockingly exceptional doctor. Master Chu went on, I'm sure the master is a respected elder, aren't they? Who could it be? Is it old Master Ba? Is the old master back? Emperor Wu shook his head. No? Then who else can it be? Since when did the Junwu Empire have such a remarkable medicine refiner? And why don't I know anything about it? I've been so ignorant. The looks the others gave Master Chu were full of sympathy. He wasn't the only ignorant one. Everyone was ignorant. We have to find this medicine refiner and invite the person to join the Bureau of Physicians. Once Her Majesty is cured, I'll have to get some tips from the elder about my elevation to the supreme level. It's vital that we invite them over. The others turned to look at Feng Wu once more. Master Chu was bewildered. Why are you all looking at her? Is she? Everyone nodded. Yes, it's her. Master Chu, you guessed right. Master Chu went up to Feng Wu and asked in an excited voice, Kid, where are the senior members of your family? May I meet them? Feng Wu looked perfectly innocent. The senior members of my family? Master Chu, why do you want to meet them? Master Chu cajoled, "Young lady, since they're great masters, it's only natural that they don't receive random visitors. Would you please let them know that Chu Firen from Chu State begs an audience?" Feng Wu didn't say anything. Master Chu smiled awkwardly. "Young lady, that's all I'm asking." Lady Northern Feng interrupted in time. "Master Chu, you're mistaken. That person wasn't Xiao Wu's family member, but Xiao Wu herself." It took Master Chu a moment to process that piece of information. "But soon, what did you say?" Master Chu almost jumped to his feet and he stared at Lady Northern Feng. "Are you telling me that she saved Her Majesty? This teenage girl?" Lady Northern Feng nodded solemnly. "That's right. It was indeed her." "That's impossible." Master Chu couldn't believe his ears. "You're not making any sense. She's no more than 15 years old, and even if she began practicing medicine in her mother's womb, she would never be able to achieve so much in less than 15 years. The person that performed that procedure has to be a supreme-level medicine refiner at least." Chapter 711, Kneel. "You!" Master Chu stared at Feng Wu so hard that his eyes almost popped out. "Tell me Lady Northern Feng was joking." Feng Wu only smiled. Instead of answering the question, she went up to the Empress Dowager and stuck a handful of silver needles in the old lady's head. "Her Majesty is in grave danger." "Master Chu, are you sure this is the right time to interrogate me?" Master Chu was speechless. He wanted to retort, but was rendered speechless by Feng Wu's consummate acupuncture skills. Facts spoke louder than words. As soon as he saw Feng Wu in action, Master Chu realized that the girl was an exceptional medical practitioner. Feng Wu looked around at the crowd, then shook her head at Emperor Wu. "There are too many people here." Master Chu stared at Feng Wu. "Are you going to treat Her Majesty now?" Feng Wu looked back at him in bewilderment. "Her Majesty is in critical condition. She could die without immediate treatment. I have to start as soon as possible. Can you promise you'll cure Her Majesty?" Emperor Wu fixed his intimidating gaze on Feng Wu, which sent a chill down her spine. Feng Wu looked back at Emperor Wu and said in a much more polite tone, "Your Majesty, Her Majesty the Empress Dowager is very ill and no doctor can say that they're 100% sure they can cure a patient. I'm no exception." She then quickly drafted a letter of commitment. "Your Majesty, I'll start treating Her Majesty after you sign this." Emperor Wu took a look at the piece of paper and his face turned livid. "Nonsense." Spiritual essence swept across the room like a gust of wind. Everyone dropped to their knees. Feng Wu felt an unfathomable force pressing down on her shoulders. Rumbled. Every part of Feng Wu cried out in pain and her knees almost turned numb. Such was the formidable power of the ruler of the Junwu Empire. Everyone else had prostrated on the floor and Feng Wu was the only one standing. Emperor Wu was indeed worthy of his fame. One couldn't begin to imagine the horror of being his target. Even their souls quivered. Compared with Emperor Wu, Feng Wu was as fragile as a newborn. She was soaked in cold sweat. Blue veins popped on her skin and blood began to ooze out of her pores. She was being crushed. She couldn't stop her slender legs from shaking. When facing absolute strength, willpower and endurance were nothing but jokes. Thump. Feng Wu's legs gave out and she dropped to her knees with a thump. She wasn't submitting to a ruler, but to his unquestionable strength. "Are you insisting on the signature?" asked Emperor Wu in a majestic, impassive voice. His gaze felt like icy blades on her skin. Emperor Wu was a dutiful son. He had never forgotten the days when he and his mother depended on each other for survival in a forgotten corner of the imperial palace. His mother had gone through many tribulations to make him emperor. Hence, he valued his mother more than anyone else. That was why here in Cining Palace, Emperor Wu and the Empress Dowager could interact like any ordinary mother and son without the ritualistic formalities. Now that the Empress Dowager's life was in danger, Emperor Wu was as worried as he was furious. "Your Majesty!" Master Chu wanted to interject, but Emperor Wu only stared at him with cold eyes and stressed each word. If anything happens to Her Majesty, Chu Firen, what do you think will happen to your head? Master Chu broke into a cold sweat. Chapter 7:12, Surrender. Master Chu knew that he was partially responsible for what had happened. He was in charge of the Empress Dowager's routine physical examination, but because of his attempts to advance to the supreme level, he had left the job to his subordinates, which was why something like this had happened. Emperor Wu stared at Feng Wu with a bone-chilling look in his eyes. Cold sweat covered Feng Wu's forehead. It was an instinctive reaction and there was nothing she could do about it. However, although her heart was pounding and she was panting like a cow with clattering teeth, Feng Wu still lowered her head and said, "Your Majesty, I'll need your signature." Emperor Wu was furious. He pointed a finger at Feng Wu. "Do you really think I won't kill you? All the land under heaven belonged to the Emperor and all within the land were the Emperor's servants. He was the ultimate boss." Feng Wu only prostrated on the floor without another word. Exasperated, Lady Northern Feng, who was kneeling next to Feng Wu, whispered to the latter through gritted teeth, Xiao Wu, just do what you're supposed to do." Lady Northern Feng wanted to smack the girl on the head. "What are you even thinking, you silly kid? What protection do you think that letter of commitment will give you if you really fail to save Her Majesty? His Majesty can have your head all the same." Emperor Wu seemed like a nice guy when he was in a good mood, but when he got angry, he wouldn't hesitate to kill everyone in this room. Feng Wu still said nothing. Emperor Wu glared at Feng Wu. This girl was as stubborn as June Linyuan. Just then, the Empress Dowager began to convulse on the bed. "Oh God!" Master Chu cried out. "Her Majesty is having another seizure. Quickly! Your Majesty, we'll lose Her Majesty if we don't treat her now." However, Feng Wu was already at the Empress Dowager's side before Emperor Wu could say a word. Of course she had to be. She was pushing the Emperor's limit, with her own life at stake. Only by finding out where the Emperor's bottom line lay could she be confident enough in her work in the future. What happened today had been a now-or-never opportunity for her. Now that His Majesty was on the verge of exploding, she would really be asking for death if she didn't yield. Emperor Wu was rendered speechless by Feng Wu's reaction. She had been all determined and stubborn a moment ago, then she surrendered. Just like that? "Your Majesty, we need to clear the room. The crowd might affect Her Majesty." "Yeah," Emperor Wu replied in a tone that was completely strange to him, and he only realized what he said afterward. However, Emperor Wu didn't need to give the order himself. The others were already hurrying toward the exit. No one wanted to be part of such a dangerous operation. They would all become collateral damage if anything happened to the Empress Dowager. It was just that Empress Dugu cast a most malicious glance at Feng Wu before she left. She simply didn't understand it. It had been so intense and ruthless just then. The Emperor and the girl had confronted each other and neither side would back off. But Feng Wu. Why had she rushed over to save Her Majesty so suddenly? And how had she dissolved the tension so easily? What happened to forcing His Majesty to sign? And what about not treating the patient without a signature? Grow a spine. Empress Dugu was still baffled when she left the room. God knew how thrilled she had been when she saw Feng Wu the bold challenge the Emperor head-on. But, why had Feng Wu given in so easily? Even His Majesty didn't know how to react. Chapter 7:13, Cured. Back inside. Feng Wu had no idea how conflicted Empress Dugu was feeling. Right now, she was focused on treating the Empress Dowager. All the other people cleared out of the room. In the end, the only ones left were Feng Wu, Emperor Wu, and Master Chu. "Your Majesty, Master Chu, you'll have to leave the room, too," Feng Wu said in a calm voice. Emperor Wu stared at Feng Wu. "Kiddo, are you sure? I'm only half as good when other people watch me work." That was the only explanation Feng Wu gave. In fact, She wanted to work alone because she couldn't use her spiritual essence when other people were around. It was still a secret. Emperor Wu darted a warning look at Feng Wu. You know what will happen if you can't cure Her Majesty. He then left the room with Master Chu. Master Chu actually wanted to stay, for he wanted to see how Feng Wu did it. He was still completely at a loss. But he couldn't stay, for even Emperor Wu had left. Darting a regretful look at Feng Wu, he walked out of the room, turning to look back repeatedly with every step. Feng Wu was finally alone. She took out a bottle of blood thinner she had concocted before and fed it to the Empress Dowager. After the aneurysm, the old lady's intracranial pressure had soared and her vitals were dropping fast. Feng Wu had to use the blood thinner, her ultimate weapon, right away. Only then did Feng Wu reach out with her right index finger and make a small cut between the old lady's eyebrows. She slowly pulled her hand back. A streak of dark red blood flew out of the old lady's head with her movement. Feng Wu directed the blood into an empty teapot. The clot had dissolved, and flowed out of the cut as well. Finally, with a wipe of Feng Wu's fingers, the tiny cut on the old lady's forehead healed completely without leaving a trace. Outside, Empress Dugu stared at Master Chu. Master Chu, are you sure about this? Can that girl do it? Master Chu smiled bitterly. If she really was the one who treated Her Majesty before I arrived, then she's definitely a much better doctor than I am. Master Chu had a big heart. As the head of the Bureau of Physicians, it was easy to assume he would be jealous of those with better medical skills. However, all Master Chu cared about were good skills, not who they belonged to. And that was exactly why Emperor Wu liked him. A cultivator's character was more important than their martial prowess. Gripping her handkerchief, Empress Dugu stared at the closed door. If the Empress Dowager died from Feng Wu's treatment, she would be able to get rid of that paranoid, biased old hag forever. And Feng Wu would die for it as well. God, please hear my prayer. Empress Dugu repeated it over and over again in her head. What are you doing? Lady Northern Feng glowered at Empress Dugu. The question startled Empress Dugu, but she reacted quickly enough and glared back at Lady Northern Feng. I'm praying for Her Majesty, of course. What do you think I'm doing? I think you're cursing Her Majesty. You! Empress Dugu glared at Lady Northern Feng with bloodshot eyes. Your Majesty, tugging at Emperor Wu's robe, Empress Dugu wailed, Lady Northern Feng is giving me such a hard time. Your Majesty, you have to do me justice. Tears welled up in her pretty eyes and she cried like a blossoming pear tree in the spring rain. The Emperor would have found her adorable on any other day, but he was in no mood at the moment. Instead, he rebuked her. Knock it off. Chapter 7:14, What's that supposed to mean? Empress Dugu hated the Empress Dowager and Feng Wu even more. Just then, there was a creaking sound. The door opened. How did it go? Lady Northern Feng was the first to ask. Feng Wu gave her a little nod, then said, It went well. I've cleared out the excessive blood in Her Majesty's head, but that's only temporary relief. What's that supposed to mean? Emperor Wu turned his cold gaze on Feng Wu. It means I've only cured the symptoms, not the disease. If we don't find the cause and get rid of it, this can happen again. When that happens, she'll be beyond saving. Is it that serious? Emperor Wu's face turned livid and he glared at Master Chu. Master Chu knelt down. Your Majesty, this is all my fault. I've been busy with my practice and... Emperor Wu ignored Master Chu, then turned back to Feng Wu. What's your plan? Feng Wu said calmly, the symptoms are in Her Majesty's head, but it started in her kidneys. Kidney deficiency results in a lack of nutrition in the liver. The liver then becomes overheated, producing phlegm that can't be released. That's why Her Majesty is in such critical condition. As the traditional saying goes in my profession, emergency treatment is temporary, execute a permanent cure in moderate conditions. Now that the most life-threatening period is over, we can make a gradual approach toward a permanent cure. I think I'll start with the kidneys. Emperor Wu went on staring at Feng Wu with a grim look on his face. Picking up a pen, Feng Wu read out the prescription in an unhurried voice. We'll start with ease powder to nourish the liver, dispel the evil energy, and reduce phlegm. After that, we'll move on to a medicine with spine date seed as its chief ingredient, which will further nourish the liver and calm the mind. Emperor Wu darted a look at Master Chu. Master Chu nodded repeatedly. Yes. That's perfect. Emperor Wu didn't know what to say. He turned to Feng Wu. When will Her Majesty wake up, then? Feed the medicine to her every 2 hours and Her Majesty should wake up after 3 doses. It's just that she won't be able to regain mobility yet. Emperor Wu nodded. One couldn't help but doubt Feng Wu's medical skills because of how young she was. However, she had proven her unquestionable capability. All they could do now was wait 6 hours. Emperor Wu had the servants fetch the medicine. Every minute felt as long as an hour. Finally, 6 hours passed. But the Empress Dowager showed no sign of waking up. Empress Dugu clenched her handkerchief, then stared at Feng Wu. Miss Feng, didn't you say that Her Majesty would wake up in 6 hours? But she's still unconscious. Feng Wu looked at the Empress with a strange expression on her face. All eyes were on Feng Wu now and Emperor Wu stared at her with his piercing gaze. The look on Feng Wu's face became even stranger. She went up to the Empress Dowager and checked her pulse. She then withdrew her hand and slowly rose to her feet. Feng Wu, did you make Her Majesty worse? The Empress Dowager isn't waking up, is she? Empress Dugu cried out. Emperor Wu looked like he was ready to kill someone. Feng Wu still said nothing. Empress Dugu was so sure that Feng Wu had failed to save the Empress Dowager. A gloating look flickered in her eyes. Feng Wu was so doomed. She was. However, Empress Dugu was still laughing inwardly when. Chapter 7:15, Astonishing. Master Chu went up to check the Empress Dowager's pulse, and the look on his face changed abruptly. Everyone looked at him in bewilderment. What? Master Chu looked confused. How can this be? The others were so intrigued. What happened? Just tell them. Is it good news or bad news? Lady Northern Feng was the most direct one. Master Chu smacked his thigh. Of course it's good news. It's the best news. Have none of you realized that Her Majesty has a little bit of spiritual essence in her now? What? Everyone, the Emperor included, was surprised. They only noticed the change after Master Chu pointed it out. The Empress Dowager has spiritual essence now. Her Majesty was once badly injured. Because of that, and with her old age, a lot of her energy channels were blocked. If spiritual essence can really start to flow in Her Majesty's body again, her health will improve greatly. Master Chu couldn't control the excitement in his voice. And what's more important is that, Master Chu turned to Emperor Wu. Your Majesty, do you still remember what I mentioned before? That Her Majesty's days are numbered. Emperor Wu clearly didn't like the mention of that at all. Master Chu went on in his agitated tone, but, with spiritual essence flowing now, Her Majesty's energy channels are unclogged, which will prolong her life. This is great news. Emperor Wu was finally moved. Are you sure? Yes. Absolutely. Master Chu turned to Feng Wu for confirmation. Miss Feng, am I right? Feng Wu nodded. Yes. Emperor Wu was overjoyed. Being emperor, he couldn't have asked for more, career-wise. However, as a filial son, he would give anything in exchange for a few more years of his mother's life. Good. That's good. Emperor Wu took a deep breath. Glad to hear it. Empress Dugu felt like she had blacked out. She couldn't for the life of her figure out why everything seemed to act against her. Nothing she wanted ever worked out, and what was worse, everything had played into Feng Wu's hands. It was as if Feng Wu was the beloved daughter of God himself. But Her Majesty hasn't woken up yet. Are we sure everything's fine? Since none of the Emperor's concubines were here, Empress Dugu could only ask the question herself. She tried her best to make Feng Wu look suspicious. It definitely wasn't Empress Dugu's lucky day. As soon as she asked that question, the fingers of the Empress Dowager, who still lay there with her eyes closed, moved slightly. Lady Northern Feng cried out in excitement. Her Majesty's fingers moved. I saw it. Then, as everyone watched, the most respected woman in the empire opened her eyes. For a moment, they were all bemused. The Empress Dowager's eyes had gone cloudy as she aged, and she had also developed cataracts. As a result, the old lady had been suffering from poor eyesight for a while. However, when she opened her eyes now, they saw that her eyes were as clear and bright as those of a baby, as if they had been washed clean with some miracle water. That was why everyone was so surprised. What? Empress Dugu's face turned livid. The Empress Dowager then sat up without anyone's help. Everyone was speechless. The Empress Dowager had had a ruptured blood vessel in her brain only 6 hours ago, but now, she could sit up on her own. That was so unbelievable. Chapter 7:16, Who's this kid? She's so pretty. Rubbing her forehead, the Empress Dowager turned around to see all the astonished faces, which made her jump. What are all these people doing here? Mother. Emperor Wu went up to her and held her hands. Mother, how do you feel? Any pain? The Empress Dowager considered for a moment. Pain? No, I feel fine. Mother, do you remember what happened before you fainted? Emperor Wu asked tentatively. Before I fainted, everything then came back to the Empress Dowager. She smacked herself on the forehead and cried out softly in pain. Lady Northern Feng stopped her in a hurry. Your Majesty, you just narrowly escaped death. Please don't do that to your head. The lady had almost had a heart attack when she heard that the Empress Dowager had an aneurysm. Before the Empress Dowager could process Lady Northern Feng's words, she grabbed the latter by the arm. Yaya. That Feng Wu is too young to be a good doctor. She must have tricked you. I've been thinking. You can give her something nice, but don't have her as your goddaughter. For a moment, the others all looked at the Empress Dowager strangely. Lady Northern Feng wanted to say something, but words failed her. The Empress Dowager patted Lady Northern Feng on the head with a stern look on her face. Are you listening to me? That girl is tricking you. She's not becoming your goddaughter. Emperor Wu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Mother. The Empress Dowager glared at Emperor Wu. You, too. I know you dote on your sister, but you have to listen to me on this. The willful Empress Dowager was acting exactly like a child now. Lady Northern Feng shook her head helplessly. At the thought of the grave danger the old lady had been in and how lively she was now, Lady Northern Feng felt that she couldn't thank Feng Wu enough. Turning around, she took Feng Wu's hands. Kid, thank you so much. What? Only then did the Empress Dowager notice Feng Wu and her eyes lit up. At her age, the Empress Dowager adored good-looking teenagers like all grandmothers did. Her face lit up when she saw Feng Wu. What a nice-looking girl. She's as eye-catching as that girl of the Zhou family, if you ask me. By the girl of the Zhou family, she meant Zhou Qingwan. Lady Northern Feng had no idea of the enmity between Feng Wu and Zhou Qingwan. She said with a smile, Your Majesty, you're spot on. This girl is even prettier than the Zhou girl. That's right. The Empress Dowager was delighted to see a pretty girl. She patted the seat next to her and said, Kiddo, come sit with me. Feng Wu was at a loss over what to say. However, she still did as told and sat down next to the Empress Dowager. What's your name? How old are you? Which family are you from? At her age and with her status, the Empress Dowager had seen her fair share of good-looking people, not to mention that the imperial palace was filled with beautiful women. However, this girl was different. She still had yet to reach her potential, but she was already a beauty. What was more, there was something non-aggressive about her look, making those around her feel very comfortable and relaxed. With a smile, Feng Wu said calmly, "Your Majesty, my name is Feng Wu." Feng Wu. The Empress Dowager didn't recognize that name at first. But when she saw Lady Northern Feng, who was trying to fight back her grin. "Feng Wu." The Empress Dowager cried out and glared at the girl. "You're Feng Wu. The girl who tried to trick Yaya. You little liar. How dare you?" Feng Wu was confused. "Yaya?" Chapter 717, Pouting. Lady Northern Feng pointed at herself and Feng Wu took the hint right away. "Your Majesty, that was a misunderstanding." Lady Northern Feng sat down next to the Empress Dowager, held the old lady's hand, and explained to her, "You were in grave danger just then, you could have died." The Empress Dowager frowned and glanced at Emperor Wu, who nodded at her. "Was it that bad?" "Yes, it was very serious. Everything happened so suddenly and Master Chu wasn't around." "Xiao Wu was the one who saved you," Lady Northern Feng explained. "Your Majesty, Xiao Wu is a wonderful doctor. Even Master Chu agrees with that." "Right, Master Chu." The Empress Dowager turned to Master Chu, looking a little confused. Master Chu smiled bitterly, but Lady Northern Feng was telling the truth. He had said it himself earlier. He could only nod. "Miss Feng Wu is unparalleled in her medical skills. I admit my defeat and I admire her from the bottom of my heart." The Empress Dowager was dumbfounded. She glanced at Feng Wu in suspicion. "That girl?" Lady Northern Feng nodded. "Your Majesty, it really was her. She practically saved you from death. We wouldn't be sitting here talking if it wasn't for her. Xiao Wu is as great a doctor as she's claimed to be." The Empress Dowager looked at Emperor Wu again. Emperor Wu nodded affirmatively. The stubborn Empress Dowager still wouldn't be convinced. She didn't want to believe it. Seeing how obstinate the Empress Dowager was, Lady Northern Feng smiled bitterly. "Your Majesty, saving you wasn't the only thing Xiao Wu did. She also cleared up your clogged energy channels. You can check for yourself. Spiritual essence has begun to gather inside you again. Am I right?" "What?" The Empress Dowager examined her own body, and there was indeed a trace of spiritual essence in her dantian. "Yes." The Empress Dowager was exhilarated and she tugged at Lady Northern Feng. "Yaya, I have spiritual essence. I have it. Right?" The lady smiled and began to cajole the Empress Dowager. "Xiao Wu is really amazing. Don't you think so?" Recalling all the things she had been saying about Feng Wu in front of her, the Empress Dowager was embarrassed. She said proudly, "Even if that's the case, she's a commoner of the Junwu Empire, which makes her my subject. Isn't it her duty to help me? What other option did she have?" Lady Northern Feng didn't like the sound of that at all. What did she mean by having no other options? All Feng Wu had to do was twist her wrist the wrong way and the old lady would be silenced forever. Of course, Lady Northern Feng knew better than to speak her mind. She only frowned. "If you ask me, Miss Feng Wu only saved Her Majesty to save herself. Because if anything happened to Her Majesty, Feng Wu would be the first to get blamed. After all, Her Majesty fell ill because of her." Empress Dugu jumped out right on time. The Empress Dowager nodded repeatedly. "The Empress is right. I got sick because I was angry with her. If anything, I should settle accounts with her first. How dare she try to take credit for fulfilling her duty?" "Humph." Blue veins popped on Lady Northern Feng's forehead. That was so unreasonable of the old lady. Feng Wu only smiled. "Your Majesty was right. I only did what I did out of self-preservation. Now that both of us are fine, I think we have the ideal outcome." After that, Feng Wu turned to leave. Lady Northern Feng stopped Feng Wu right away. "Xiao Wu, you can't leave just like that. She turned to the Empress Dowager in exasperation. Your Majesty, only your symptoms have been treated. With Xiao Wu gone, no one will be able to work out a permanent cure for you. We'll be so worried. The Empress Dowager pouted at Lady Northern Feng's words. Chapter 7:18, Where is he taking her? After that, Lady Northern Feng began to browbeat the old lady. Your Majesty, Master Chu won't be able to treat you. The Empress Dowager stared at Master Chu in turn. Master Chu gave her a wry smile. Miss Feng Wu is indeed a better doctor than I am. There's no doubt of it. The Empress Dowager was speechless. The old lady had never felt this defeated in her life. She looked up and threw a dirty look at Feng Wu. Feng Wu rubbed her nose. What on earth did she do? It seemed that the capricious Empress Dowager had made up her mind to dislike her. However, everything happened for a reason, and the Empress Dowager's bias was no exception. It was just that Feng Wu hadn't found out what that reason was. While Lady Northern Feng stayed behind to placate the Empress Dowager, Emperor Wu glanced at Feng Wu, then walked out of the room. He stood outside Cining Palace, facing away from the door. Dressed in his thick cape, the Emperor looked authoritative and majestic from behind. Your Majesty. Feng Wu bowed in reverence. The Emperor Wu now was a different person from the son in Cining Palace a moment ago. When he was around the Empress Dowager, Emperor Wu acted like any normal son. As expected, Emperor Wu turned his head and stared at Feng Wu with his piercing black eyes. His voice was as cold as frost. You did well. He acknowledged her work. However, Feng Wu felt a chill run down her spine and cold sweat covered her back. Emperor Wu marched off after that. Feng Wu was still dazed when Master Bai went up to her and reminded her in a low voice, Miss Wu, what are you doing standing here? Right. Feng Wu had no idea where Emperor Wu was going and what he had in mind, but she had no choice but to follow. And here was what the others witnessed in the Imperial Palace that day. The tall, strong Emperor Wu strode quickly along the corridors. The tiny, pretty Feng Wu followed him in a hurry. Before long, Feng Wu arrived outside a prison. A prison? What were they doing here? However, Emperor Wu seemed to be in a foul mood at the moment. His eyes were brooding and he gave off an intimidating air. Feng Wu didn't dare to ask and had to keep her silence. A dark, long passageway led them to a cell. Feng Wu expected to see a dark, damp, and humid place with a foul air. To her surprise, the cell was in quite acceptable condition. It was dry, tidy, and didn't have any particular smell. The prisoners on this level were all important criminals of the imperial court. Conflicted looks appeared on many faces when the prisoners saw the emperor, and they dropped to their knees, one after another. As Emperor Wu walked in, everyone on the way, prisoners and guards alike, knelt and prostrated, awed by the emperor's majestic presence. Feng Wu thought to herself, well, that was what it was like to be an emperor. He was so superior that he could have anyone decapitated with a glance. One sentence and he could have an entire clan wiped off the face of the earth. Feng Wu took a deep breath and forced herself to focus. She knew what her problem was. Because she was essentially a modern woman, she didn't have the adequate reverence toward the emperor ingrained in her. But the fact was that she was living in a world with an autocratic monarchy now, and here, martial prowess was valued above all else. She had only just restarted her cultivation and she was much weaker than the average government official, not to mention the emperor himself. Who was she to feel unintimidated by the emperor? Once Feng Wu figured that out, she was much more relieved. When she looked up, she saw that the door to a cell a few steps away had opened. And Emperor Wu had sat down in a chair. Chapter 7:19, Talk about a stunning beauty. Tucking his hands in the thick cape, Emperor Wu sat there with a nonchalant and distant look on his face. It was as if the others were nothing but ants to him. A man was taken out of one of the cells. It was a refined middle-aged man with a square face and a broad forehead. Upon seeing Emperor Wu, something flickered in the middle-aged man's indifferent eyes. Your Majesty, you've finally spared some time for me. The middle-aged man stared at Emperor Wu and spoke in a tone that was neither too humble nor too pushy. He even sounded a little egoistic. For he was confident that what he had done wouldn't get him killed. Moreover, the Zhou family would be pulling every string they had to get him out. Hence, Emperor Wu wouldn't let him die, and it was even possible that the man would get away with a slap on the wrist. Feng Wu, speak. Emperor Wu smiled a little and said in an indifferent tone. Speak? Did he mean it? Staring at Mr. Zhou, Feng Wu recalled how the Zhou family had tried to kill her 5 years ago. In the end, it was Zhou Qingluan who had deprived Feng Wu of all her cultivation ability. And Mr. Zhou was one of the culprits back then. The Zhou family. And Mr. Zhou. Feng Wu raised her voice all of a sudden. Mr. Zhou, it's been a while. Mr. Zhou was bewildered. Miss, you are. Mr. Zhou, do you not know who I am? Otherwise, why are you locked up here? Feng Wu smiled. You are. Feng Wu. Mr. Zhou finally recognized her face. The girl had changed greatly from 5 years ago, and she only remotely looked like the little girl she had been. She was stunning now. The moment he saw Feng Wu's face, Mr. Zhou felt deeply threatened. Zhou Qingluan had always considered herself the top socialite of the imperial capital in appearance, talent, and cultivation. However, as soon as Mr. Zhou saw Feng Wu, he was astonished by how beautiful she was. Talk about bringing down cities and conquering the world with one's beauty alone. The girl had yet to reach her full potential, and when that happened, Mr. Zhou couldn't imagine how Zhou Qingluan would react when she saw Feng Wu's face. I'm Feng Wu, the one whose exam paper was switched out by Mr. Zhou. I almost didn't make it to the next round. Thanks to His Majesty, our most sagacious emperor, my exam paper was retrieved. Feng Wu smiled at Mr. Zhou. Mr. Zhou fidgeted. The girl might as well have slapped him in public. Such a blatant accusation could embarrass an experienced politician like himself. He looked up and stared at Feng Wu with a grim look on his face. The girl was so level-headed. Mr. Zhou had been observing Feng Wu the whole time and comparing her with Zhou Qingluan. Before Feng Wu showed up, Mr. Zhou had always believed that Zhou Qingluan was doubtlessly the most eminent young lady of note in the imperial capital. But his faith was shaken after meeting Feng Wu. Mr. Zhou's first reaction was to check Feng Wu's cultivation ability. Detecting no spiritual essence, Mr. Zhou sighed with relief. That settled Mr. Zhou's mind right away, and he no longer saw Feng Wu as a threat. Your Majesty, I've been treated unjustly. Emperor Wu had kept his eye on Mr. Zhou the whole time. Upon hearing those words, a chilly, unfathomable look flickered in the emperor's eyes. Go on, Emperor Wu said casually. Darting a look at Feng Wu, Mr. Zhou said in a solemn tone, the incident with the exam paper only happened because that teacher tried to play up to me. I myself found his conduct unnecessary the whole time. Really? Emperor Wu said indifferently. Mr. Zhou sounded very calm. Your Majesty, all crimes have motives. I had no reason to steal Feng Wu's paper. Chapter 720, Dead? Emperor Wu remained unperturbed. Go on. Your Majesty, the only connection between Feng Wu and my family is, Mr. Zhou wanted to mention the Crown Prince, but the marriage contract between Zhou Qingluan and Jun Linyuan was still uncertain. Mr. Zhou didn't want to offend the emperor, so he changed the subject. The only connection is that Feng Wu used to have the true phoenix blood as Zhou Qingluan does now. Emperor Wu nodded. But then, Feng Wu lost her abilities somehow and became crippled, whereas Zhou Qingluan has risen above all her peers. Right now, she's already a spiritual elder. Your Majesty, as a leading figure of the Zhou clan, why would I need to do anything to a crippled girl like Failure Wu? She's too unimportant for me to handle personally. She's not worth it. Mr. Zhou darted a contemptuous glance at Feng Wu. Back then, Zhou Qingluan had insisted on crippling Feng Wu at the price of exposing herself, and the Zhou clan hadn't thought much of it, for neither Feng Wu nor the Feng clan was well connected enough to do anything about it. They had no one to turn to after what happened to Feng Wu. Mr. Zhuo snorted inwardly. The emperor was a pragmatic person, and a crippled girl like Feng Wu wasn't worth going through any trouble for. Feng Wu knew that as well, which was why the truth had remained hidden. She could only keep the humiliation to herself. Emperor Wu darted an indifferent glance at Feng Wu. What do you think? He was being very ambiguous. And Feng Wu wasn't happy about his attitude at all. The sight of Mr. Zhuo reminded her of how they had destroyed her. She wouldn't be holding so many grudges if it wasn't for her beautiful master, who had fallen into a coma since then because of her. Even if her beautiful master had a chance to wake up, who was going to make up for the 5 years she had lost? Feng Wu couldn't think of anything else. She only knew that she needed her revenge. Your Majesty, Feng Wu stepped out and met Emperor Wu's gaze with her cold eyes. I have told Grand Secretary Feng about everything that happened back then, and I'm not going to argue with Mr. Zhuo today. Is that so? Your Majesty, I saved Her Majesty the Empress Dowager. Yes, you did. I think that's a favor big enough to trade for Mr. Zhuo's life. Feng Wu charged at Mr. Zhuo like a cannonball before she finished her sentence. It was quicker than anyone could react. The next thing they knew, Feng Wu had stabbed a dagger into Mr. Zhuo's heart. Being able to hold the position of the deputy principal of Imperial College proved how capable Mr. Zhuo was. He was among the most superior cultivators of the empire. But when he was imprisoned, his cultivation ability had been temporarily disabled. Because of that, he was completely defenseless when Feng Wu pushed the blade into his chest. Mr. Zhuo stared at Feng Wu in disbelief, his eyes opened so wide that his eyeballs could fall out at any moment. He looked at Feng Wu and the dagger in his chest in turn. The entire blade was buried in his chest, up to the hilt. Coldness spread out from his heart to all 4 limbs. That hurt. He was scared. And the fear. It all happened in the middle of the prison, and all the prisoners in the surrounding cells witnessed what Feng Wu did. She didn't even flinch. How resolute. It was astonishing. What a girl. You, Mr. Zhuo shuddered violently. He had thought that the Emperor was here today to release him. After all, he was the head of Imperial College. Chapter 721, Your Majesty, I have a secret. Even if the Emperor was convinced that Mr. Zhuo had rigged the examination by mishandling the exam paper of one student, Mr. Zhuo didn't think that there would be any serious consequences. That was why he had been so bold. However, he had never expected Feng Wu to attack him. And it was a killing move. She was so fast that no one had been able to react in time. Even Emperor Wu jumped a little. He shifted his gaze to Feng Wu and the look in his eyes grew colder. Thump. Mr. Zhuo fell back and the back of his head hit the ground first. His skull cracked and blood oozed out. He was dead before that happened. Emperor Wu's gaze locked on Feng Wu, and he looked very grim. Those piercing eyes. They had an authoritative look in them, which was characteristic of someone of his status. It was as sharp as a blade that could kill. The temperature in the prison plummeted. No one dared to make a sound. Even the cunning masterby and the chief steward, the latter genuinely worried about Feng Wu, shivered like autumn leaves. Neither said a word. Emperor Wu was furious. A chilly gust of wind swept out toward Feng Wu. Feng Wu was frozen to her bones. She could almost hear them crack. She was cold, in pain, and couldn't breathe. Taking a deep breath, Feng Wu dropped to her knees at Emperor Wu's feet. Feng Wu, how dare you? Emperor Wu bellowed. You killed him. Right in front of me. Feng Wu bit her lower lip and used all her strength to fight the cold. She couldn't use her spiritual essence, for the Emperor would notice it right away. Answer me. The chair shattered at Emperor Wu's smack and he rose to his feet. Wrapped in the thick cape, his stout body gave off an intimidating energy, demonstrating his boundless power. Feng Wu bit her lip. Your Majesty, you have my utmost respect, but I couldn't control myself and I had to kill him. He was one of the people I would never forgive. Feng Wu clenched her fists and sounded indignant. Emperor Wu was so infuriated that he laughed. Why did you kill him? Because he deserved it. Feng Wu ground her teeth. So, it was personal. I'll spare your life if you can convince me. Otherwise, you're going to join Zhua He very soon. Feng Wu's eyes darted around. Emperor Wu smirked. Was she stalling? Your Majesty, may I speak to you in private? Feng Wu looked at him with her limpid black eyes and suggested in a solemn tone. Emperor Wu was rendered speechless. The girl acted as if it was some confidential information. Did she have any idea that if she couldn't explain herself, she would lose her head very soon? Why should I grant you that request? Emperor Wu glared at Feng Wu. Then, he saw the girl shivering a little. Was his voice that frightening? Crossing his hands behind his back, Emperor Wu snorted. Feng Wu looked up, darted a pleading look at Emperor Wu, and lowered her head again. Emperor Wu was intrigued by Feng Wu's little affectations. Was she trying to read his mood? However, one simply couldn't stay mad at the girl when she looked so pitiful. But Emperor Wu still wouldn't relax his facial muscles and went on glaring at Feng Wu. Your Majesty, still on her knees, Feng Wu inched forward until she was a meter away from Emperor Wu. Your Majesty, watch out! Master Bai was on guard. He feared that Feng Wu would charge out again and use another dagger on the Emperor. Emperor Wu gave Master Bai an, "Are you an idiot, look? Who did the eunuch think the Emperor was? This crippled girl would never be able to touch him. Use your head, man." Chapter 722, Unbelievable. Feng Wu ignored Master Bai. She looked up, giving the others a full view of her stunning face. She then stared at Emperor Wu with her limpid doe eyes. Feng Wu's mother was the most beautiful woman in the empire. The apple never fell too far from the tree. She only needed to mimic part of her mother's expression, and Emperor Wu couldn't stay mad at the pitiful girl. He even wanted to reflect on himself, thinking that he might have been a little too mean. Your Majesty, I killed him because he was one of the people that was responsible for my losing my ability. I'll never let it drop. I will have my revenge. The first half of her speech was expressed with deep feeling and fervor, but the second half sounded rather willful. Emperor Wu was surprised. He asked, "Didn't you lose your ability because you got greedy and overstretched yourself?" "No, I didn't." Feng Wu defended herself. "The Zhua family did it to me. They're evil people." "And your evidence?" Emperor Wu challenged her. "I killed him and that's my evidence," Feng Wu said matter-of-factly. "Why would I waste such a big favor from your Majesty if it wasn't for a deep-seated hatred?" Both Master Bai and the chief steward were speechless. Master Bai was astonished by how bold Feng Wu was, whereas the chief steward was worried about Feng Wu. Both men served Emperor Wu day in and day out and they both knew how capricious the emperor was in temperament. This girl had said the first thing that came to her mind without even trying to restrain herself. How dare she mention a favor? Did she have a death wish? Master Bai snorted inwardly. He believed that the girl would die before she realized it. Emperor Wu chewed on Feng Wu's answer. Such a big favor? Feng Wu looked all innocent. I saved Her Majesty the Empress Dowager. Your Majesty, wasn't that a big enough favor? I informed Your Majesty before I killed him just then. Emperor Wu was speechless. So that was what she had been doing? Informing him? However, His Majesty smirked. As a subject, it's your duty to offer Her Majesty your service. Are you asking for a reward? And how dare you talk about me owing you a favor? Feng Wu lowered her little head reluctantly. Speak! Emperor Wu bellowed. He was so loud. Feng Wu slowly raised her head and looked at Emperor Wu with puppy dog eyes. She mumbled, if I saved someone else's mother, not only would they pay me, they would find an opportunity to return that favor. She said those words in the tiniest voice, but of course Emperor Wu wouldn't miss any of it. He was so vexed that he chuckled. His face then turned grim. Are you saying that I'm inferior to some commoner? Still kneeling there, Feng Wu stuck out her chest and beamed at him with the brightest smile. She looked wonderful, but not as wonderful as the words that rolled off her tongue. Your Majesty, you shouldn't belittle yourself like that. You're the greatest conqueror, adept with both the pen and the sword. You're a paragon of virtue, striking the universe with your greatness. People respect and admire you. Your contributions will benefit generations to come, and it's a record that has never been nor ever will be reached again. What's more, you're eminently talented. You have a casual and elegant bearing, and the manner of a delicate beauty, which will stay unsurpassed for generations. Everyone falls in love with you. Your martial prowess is unchallenged, you're a genius without peer in your generation, and you have all the virtue of the greatest sages in history. There really is no other emperor like you. Everyone's mouths fell open. If their eyes opened any wider, their eyeballs would fall out. Master Bai couldn't believe it. He almost wanted to give Feng Wu a thumbs up. He was known for his ingratiating expressions, and he had worked hard to expand his vocabulary. However, compared with Feng Wu, Master Bai felt that he had been thrashed. Chapter 723, Your Majesty, my legs are asleep. The chief steward didn't know what to say. He couldn't even look at the girl and had to smile wryly to himself. What a kid. She showed her white feathers when necessary, stepped up when needed, and spared no ingratiating words when she asked for a favor. Judging from her courage and brazen manner, the chief steward believed that not many people could be her match. Emperor Wu didn't know what to say. Looking at Feng Wu, he wanted to say something, but all words failed him. At this age, he had never been praised in such a blatant manner before. Everyone else was so subtle about it. Finally, Master Bai came back to himself. This wasn't right. He was against Feng Wu and he had to do something about it. Mr. Zhua had been killed. If he just stood around, his alliance with the Zhua family would. At that thought, Master Bai had no choice but to step out. Miss Feng Wu, for a young lady, you're so hypocritical. As soon as Master Bai mentioned that word, Feng Wu's eyes lit up. I dug this pit just for you, Master Bai. And you finally jumped in. Feng Wu frowned and looked indignant. Master Bai, did you just call my praise for His Majesty hypocritical? Are you saying that I'm lying? That His Majesty isn't the greatest conqueror, adept with both the pen and the sword, and he's not a paragon of virtue, striking the universe with his greatness? That people don't respect and admire him? That his contributions won't benefit generations to come? Master Bai almost had a heart attack. Of course he didn't mean that. But Feng Wu had twisted his words to sound exactly like that. Master Bai's knees buckled and he scrambled to Emperor Wu's feet. Your Majesty, it's all my fault. I'm guilty. Emperor Wu stared at Master Bai with a grim look on his face. Feng Wu didn't say anything else, for she didn't want to overdo it. She lowered her head and knelt there in silence, acting like an obedient girl and trying to attract as little attention as possible. Emperor Wu looked from Master Bai to Feng Wu, then back. Feng Wu held her breath. She was trying to push Emperor Wu's limits. Only by finding his bottom line could she make sure she would say just the right thing in the future. If Emperor Wu kicked Master Bai away now, the eunuch would walk away safely. However, if Emperor Wu kept his silence, Master Bai would have to watch out from now on. Emperor Wu stared at Master Bai without saying a word. He then turned to Feng Wu. Feng Wu, you're very bold. Feng Wu kept her head lowered without making a sound. You tricked Bai right in front of me. That was very clever of you. Feng Wu cringed, but still didn't say anything. Do you take me for an idiot? She had to reply to that question. Raising her head abruptly, Feng Wu said in a solemn voice, Your Majesty, how can you say that about yourself? You're extremely intelligent, you're wise and far-sighted, and you tower above the rest in intellect. It was clear that Feng Wu was going to drown Emperor Wu with her compliments again, and Emperor Wu's face almost turned green. Fine. Fine. He waved her off impatiently. Save your spit. I've heard enough of your flattery. All right. But Feng Wu wouldn't keep still and she would squirm every now and then. Emperor Wu stared at her. Behave yourself. Stop squirming. Feng Wu looked up and pleaded with her Bambi eyes, Your Majesty, my legs are asleep. Emperor Wu almost laughed. Chapter 724, The Innocent Heart of a Child. Her legs were asleep. So many people had knelt before the emperor, and surely the girl couldn't be the only one whose legs turned numb, but she was the first to say it aloud. However, that only made Emperor Wu find her a frank, lovely girl. As an emperor who dealt with political tactics day in and day out, he naturally preferred a naive, harmless, and sincere girl who spoke her mind. But Emperor Wu wouldn't let the girl know what he thought, in case she became too pleased with herself. Putting his hands behind his back, Emperor Wu straightened his face and smirked. Is that how you show your reverence for me? Feng Wu replied in a solemn tone, Your Majesty, that just shows how much I hold you in awe and veneration. You think? Emperor Wu snorted. Yes. Your Majesty. Feng Wu shifted a little to find a more comfortable position before she looked up at Emperor Wu. Your Majesty, my legs are asleep, I'd be lying to you if I made up some other answer. That's how I think I should express my veneration for you, to be as frank and honest as an innocent child. Your Majesty, what do you think? Emperor Wu felt silent. He really couldn't think of a way to retort to her. The chief steward stole a glance at Feng Wu and Emperor Wu, then vented his sarcasm inwardly. His Majesty might sound impatient at the girl's words, but both the current atmosphere and his attitude had improved before he realized it. The chief steward admired Feng Wu for what she had achieved. There was something so peculiar about the kid that she seemed to bring joy wherever she went. No matter how furious one was, the girl could soothe them with a few lines. If anyone else had tried to do the same thing, they would have been whipped senseless by now. Emperor Wu didn't know what to do with Feng Wu. This girl would listen obediently when he scolded her, but as soon as he softened a little, she would try something else. If he glared at her, she would lower her head and steal pleading glances at him. It just so happened that the girl was exceptionally beautiful. It was said that one shouldn't turn away from a smiling face, not to mention that she had such a pretty smile. Emperor Wu was at a loss over what to do. However, his face betrayed nothing. No one could read an emperor's mind and Feng Wu was no exception. Someone had brought in a new chair when she wasn't looking. Once Emperor Wu was seated again, he darted a casual glance at Feng Wu, trying to think of a way to punish the girl. As innocent as a child, she said. It reminded Emperor Wu of his son. Just then, Master Bai said, Is Miss Feng Wu very familiar with His Royal Highness? Feng Wu stiffened. Master Bai's revenge had come quicker than she thought. Emperor Wu was alarmed as well. Jun Linyuan was his most valuable heir, and what was more, Bai had obviously held something back. Emperor Wu then recalled the jade pendant. According to the Empress Dowager, it was such an important piece that the cold-hearted Jun Linyuan should never have given it away under any circumstances, not to mention that he had given it to Feng Wu. Emperor Wu found it the strangest thing. Did Jun Linyuan like Feng Wu? Emperor Wu would never believe it. So, it was because of the girl herself. Little Feng Wu, did you say that your frankness proves your veneration for me? Yes. So, tell me. What do you think of Jun Linyuan? What did she think of Jun Linyuan? Feng Wu wouldn't stop complaining about Jun Linyuan if they let her. Ever since she had met him again in northern border city, Jun Linyuan had sabotaged her missions more times than she could count, all the way from northern border city to the imperial capital. Feng Wu wanted more than anything else to tell Emperor Wu everything. But it wouldn't be a good idea to trash a son in front of his dad, right? Chapter 725, Your Majesty, it's a big misunderstanding. Feng Wu was conflicted. Are you hesitating? Emperor Wu stared at Feng Wu. What happened to as innocent as a child? Feng Wu felt that she had dug her own grave. She should have never mentioned the frank, honest bullshit. What did she think of Jun Linyuan? Where should she start? She had lost count of how many times she had suffered losses because of him. However, she couldn't tell that to Jun Linyuan's dad. What if Jun Linyuan refused to give her back the broken star piece when he heard about this? The broken star piece was the most important thing. Grinding her teeth, Feng Wu forced a smile. His Royal Highness? Well, he's good. Excellent. Like, perfect. Of course he knew his son was perfect. Emperor Wu was glad to hear Feng Wu sing praises of Jun Linyuan. Exactly how good is he? Emperor Wu shifted in his chair and asked casually. Seeing that Emperor Wu had changed into a more comfortable position, indicating that he was ready to hear a long speech, Feng Wu was a little flustered. Miss Wu, Your Majesty asked you a question, the chief steward kindly reminded Feng Wu, who had let her mind wander off. Sure, well, His Royal Highness is so great that I don't know where to start. Feng Wu chuckled awkwardly. Emperor Wu rolled his eyes. Start from anywhere and be quick about it. Ahem, Feng Wu cleared her throat. If she had to sing a hymn of praise for Jun Linyuan, she would make sure that she did it right. She had to make the emperor happy. Feng Wu said, His Royal Highness is the best. He's talented beyond compare, he's a superb cultivator, and he's more capable than anyone could ever imagine. She then stole a glance at Emperor Wu and saw that he didn't seem impressed. Fine, she would try harder. His Royal Highness is wise, unbelievably resourceful, and has perused books of all sorts. He can answer any question, regardless of how uncommon the subject is. He's like a living library. Feng Wu stole another glance at Emperor Wu. His Majesty still looked so indifferent, but why? It then occurred to Feng Wu. How dumb of her. She was focusing on Jun Linyuan only and had forgotten about Emperor Wu. She changed her strategy right away. His Royal Highness is adept in both the pen and the sword. He's eminently talented. He has a casual and elegant bearing, and the manner of a delicate beauty, which will remain unsurpassed for generations. Everyone falls in love with him. No wonder His Royal Highness is so incredible, he's your son. I'm sure he inherited everything from Your Majesty. Feng Wu was very pleased with her little speech. Not only did she say a lot of good things about Jun Linyuan, she had played up to Emperor Wu at the same time. She was confident that Emperor Wu would be glad to hear it. But the longer Emperor Wu listened to her, the darker his face became. He narrowed his eyes. He was right. Like many girls out there, this girl liked his son. And this girl thought she could keep it from him. Feng Wu's stomach lurched. Wait. This wasn't right. She needed to think. Before she could figure it out, Emperor Wu spoke in an unhurried tone. Little Feng Wu, were you telling the truth? Checkmate. Why, yes. So, you like Jun Linyuan, don't you? Emperor Wu stared at Feng Wu with a half-smile. That was it. Feng Wu stood there dazed, as if she had been struck by lightning. She finally knew what she had done wrong. Everyone thought she was in love with Jun Linyuan, and Emperor Wu had his suspicions, too. That was why he had asked for her opinion on Jun Linyuan. While she praised Jun Linyuan against her will, Emperor Wu was convinced that she was in love. She had been set up. Your Majesty, it's not what you think. Feng Wu was almost rendered speechless. Your Majesty, it's not like that. It's a big misunderstanding. Chapter 726, The Girl Knows What to Do. Your Majesty, I'm not. There's nothing between me and Jun Linyuan. Nothing. Feng Wu shouted at the top of her lungs. Why are you so agitated? What are you trying to cover up? I'm not. Feng Wu felt like crying. She had jumped into the pit she had dug herself. Feng Wu wanted to smack her own head. Emperor Wu smirked. Like hell, I'm going to believe you. But he only darted an emotionless glance at Feng Wu. All girls are in love with the crown prince. You're not that special. Yes. Feng Wu could live with that conclusion from the emperor. However, Master Bai interjected at that moment. I heard that His Royal Highness carried Miss Feng Wu on his shoulder. Carry? On his shoulder? Those words didn't fit Jun Linyuan at all. Emperor Wu stared at Master Bai. Are you sure? Feng Wu wanted to throttle Master Bai right there and then. What an evil man. He was the worst. Master Bai was satisfied to see how flustered Feng Wu was. He made a show of pondering the question before answering it. Your Majesty, I think that really happened, and it took place in World Tower. Feng Wu. Emperor Wu stared at Feng Wu. That was because, Feng Wu was going to explain, but Emperor Wu had risen to his feet. You can call the Crown Prince cousin from now on, and that's my answer to the big favor you asked for. After giving Feng Wu one last grim look, he turned to leave. Feng Wu mumbled, cousin. She didn't want to have Jun Linyuan as her cousin at all. She wanted to explain everything. However, she had lost that chance, because Emperor Wu had marched off. That Master Bai. He was so cunning. Feng Wu clenched her fists. Find out what really happened, Emperor Wu said in a low but chilly voice. Cining Palace. Both Lady Northern Feng and Empress Dugu had stayed behind to keep the Empress Dowager company. And they were talking about Feng Wu as well. Lady Northern Feng was praising Feng Wu and Empress Dugu was trashing the girl. As a result, the two women were about to start a row again. They only calmed down because Emperor Wu entered the hall. Your Majesty, Lady Northern Feng insists on having Feng Wu as her goddaughter. How about we just give the girl some money and stop this nonsense? Empress Dugu disliked Feng Wu so much that the last thing she wanted was for her status to increase. Lady Northern Feng wanted to retort, but Emperor Wu stopped her with a wave of his hand. If you insist on having her as a daughter, you can, but you have to wait after Her Majesty has fully recovered, said Emperor Wu casually. Keep it quiet. Showing her around in the family will be enough. Although Lady Northern Feng was a tough and willful woman, having grown up in the Imperial Palace, she was too good at reading faces. And she knew what His Majesty meant right away. All right. Lady Northern Feng felt sorry for Feng Wu and decided that she would make it up to her in the future. That girl is really pretty. Too bad she's crippled, said the Empress Dowager. If she and Junjun somehow got together, she might give birth to a little crippled baby. The old lady was frightened by her own imagination and waved her hands. No, we can't let that happen. Yaya, try not to bring the girl here from now on. Okay. Lady Northern Feng was speechless. Emperor Wu said, Mother, please don't worry. I've warned her and the girl knows what to do. Feng Wu had no idea that she had just been blacklisted as the most unpopular person by the royal family. Chapter 727, Only then will he be able to protect you. The first thing Lady Northern Feng did after she left the Imperial Palace was to summon Feng Wu. The last thing His Majesty said was that you could address His Royal Highness as cousin. Lady Northern Feng frowned. Feng Wu was confused. Didn't His Majesty want me to stay away from Jun Linyuan? Why would he want me to become Jun Linyuan's cousin? I think I know why. Why? Because Princess Wanning used to follow him around and he ended up making this announcement. Lady Northern Feng looked into Feng Wu's eyes and stressed each word. He said that he would never marry a cousin. From then on, all those princesses stopped throwing themselves at him and left him in peace. Feng Wu said, he can do that. Holy shit. Lady Northern Feng smacked her on the back of her head. You're a girl, mind your language. All right. Feng Wu rubbed her head. Lady Northern Feng had already switched into mom mode, and had started to smack Feng Wu around like she did with Feng Sun. "Did you offend His Majesty?" Lady Northern Feng asked suspiciously. "Of course not. I only said nice things and he was so happy," Feng Wu said in a solemn tone. Lady Northern Feng gave Feng Wu a strange look. "Then why did His Majesty tell me that I should keep the news inside the family and forget about the big party?" Feng Wu said, "Well. And I have to wait until the Empress Dowager is fully recovered." Lady Northern Feng sighed. "I have no problem with that. I won't be in the mood anyway." "But..." Lady Northern Feng wasn't convinced. "Why can't I throw a big party? I was planning to tell the whole world that you're my daughter now, and no one will ever pick on you again." Feng Wu said, "Well, keeping it quiet is fine with me, actually." "No, it's not. Grow a spine. Now tell me. What did you do to offend His Majesty?" "His Majesty asked me what I thought of Jun Linyuan." Feng Wu looked at Lady Northern Feng. "What do you think I should say?" "Say that he's the best. Spare no effort." "Yes, that was what I did." "And His Majesty got mad?" "Yes. But I think I overdid it and led him to the wrong conclusion. His Majesty thinks I'm in love with Jun Linyuan." Feng Wu wanted to cry. "Why on earth would I fall in love with that guy? That's never going to happen." "Ah!" Feng Wu clenched her fists in frustration. "Ha ha ha, ha 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 ha." Lady Northern Feng convulsed with laughter and she laughed until her belly ached and her eyes watered. "Ouch, my belly." Feng Wu rolled her eyes at Lady Northern Feng. "That makes sense, ha ha ha." After a while, Lady Northern Feng finally stopped laughing. "That was why His Majesty made Junjun your cousin and told me to keep you as far away from court as possible. I see why he was taking all the precautions now." Feng Wu was frustrated. "Against me? Why? Jun Linyuan finds me repulsive. He'll never like me." "Kiddo," Lady Northern Feng jabbed Feng Wu's forehead with a finger. "With your good looks, you pose a threat to a lot of people just by showing up. Of course they'll raise their guard. You haven't reached your full potential yet and they fear what you'll become." Feng Wu didn't say anything. "This won't do. I need to prod Ah-sun in his cultivation." Feng Wu was dumbfounded. "Only then will he be able to protect you in the future. Otherwise..." Chapter 728, "But how is that possible?" Feng Wu said, "Actually, I can protect myself." Lady Northern Feng rolled her eyes at Feng Wu. "Forget it. Without cultivation ability, it doesn't matter how strong your physique is. All the enemies you've encountered so far were spiritual masters, which is why you could fend them off with your physical strength alone. But when they become spiritual grandmasters or spiritual elders, as they improve, you'll lag behind, because your physical strength will grow at a much slower rate than their cultivation. The discrepancy will only grow bigger." Lady Northern Feng admonished her. "It's like the difference between common soldiers and officers in the army. Without spiritual essence, the best you can be is a chief petty officer. Those with spiritual essence, however, can start off as captains and lieutenants. From there, they'll then become majors, colonels, or even major generals. Whereas you, Xiao Wu, you'll remain an NCO, which is as far as you can get." Lady Northern Feng got more concerned as she spoke. "By the way, do you really not feel anything for Jun Linyuan?" With Jun Linyuan as a patron, Feng Wu could get through anything even if she was 10 times prettier than she was now. "Stop making fun of me. I can't stay far away enough from Jun Linyuan, not to mention that the royal family doesn't like me at all." Feng Wu smiled bitterly. She needed to keep her distance from Jun Linyuan from now on. "I guess it's better this way." Lady Northern Feng nodded. Those in the imperial palace couldn't keep Feng Wu far away enough, as if the girl actually wanted to marry Jun Linyuan. Just then, footsteps came from outside. It was Feng Sun. Lady Northern Feng frowned as soon as she spotted her son. Forget about Jun Linyuan. Ah, Sun here was no less troublesome. He had been ranting about not wanting a sister. Lady Northern Feng was trying to figure out a way to get Feng Sun to accept Feng Wu when she noticed the boy Feng Sun dragged in. It was the sixth son of the Mu family. Mu the sixth, I have a sister now. Behave yourself around her from now on. Got it? Mu the sixth was speechless. What had he done to deserve this? He had been walking on the street when Feng Sun spotted him, and that guy wouldn't shut up about having a sister. Who didn't have a sister nowadays? Mu the sixth had a dozen of those at home. But Feng Sun was his boss and Mu the sixth needed to play up to him. He had no choice but to smile obsequiously. Brother Feng, congratulations. You finally have a sister now. You don't say. I have the prettiest sister in the world. Do you? Mu the sixth thought to himself. He didn't believe it. If someone could claim that title, he would give it to that little Feng Wu whom he had met the other day. Of course. And she's the most brilliant girl as well. Feng Sun said proudly. Really? Mu the sixth went on doubting his boss in his head. The most brilliant girl would still be little Feng Wu, who got the highest mark in the written exam. She was also the very first candidate to get full marks. Yes. And my sister can do so much more. Formations, medical skills, you name it. She's the best in everything. Is she? Mu the sixth's eyes flickered, as if he was excited to hear it. But what he thought was, Brother Feng, you're so full of shit. Hey, what's with that look? You don't believe me? No, Brother Feng, of course I believe you. I was just thinking, that you're exaggerating a little. He would be convinced if Feng Sun's new sister was Feng Wu. But how was that possible? Chapter 729, Boss Jun will back you up. Exaggerate? Ha! Feng Sun gloated. That's because you haven't met my sister. You'll be stunned once you know how amazing she is. Yes, of course, Mu the sixth had no choice but to succumb. Feng Sun and Mu the sixth chatted as they walked in. Both Feng Wu and Lady Northern Feng had sharp ears and they heard the entire conversation. Lady Northern Feng was dumbfounded. She thought Feng Sun didn't like Xiao Wu, but he was already showing his sister off. That brat. Just then, Feng Sun walked in with Mu the sixth. And Feng Sun stopped abruptly as soon as he set foot inside. His mother was here and so was little Feng Wu. Feng Sun was speechless. Did his mother hear what he said out there just then? Lady Northern Feng darted a glance at Feng the third. You, come here and greet your sister. Feng Sun raised his chin. Like hell. I told you I didn't want a sister. Lady Northern Feng was speechless. So was Mu the sixth. Lady Northern Feng smirked. His Majesty has spoken. Xiao Wu is going to address His Royal Highness as cousin. What? Feng Sun almost jumped to his feet. Why? I won't have it. No way. She's my sister. Mine. Why should he get a share? Mu the sixth tugged at Feng Sun's sleeve. Brother Feng, by your sister, you mean? Little Feng Wu. Feng Sun had forgotten all about his pride. Throwing an arm over Feng Wu's shoulders, he made the introduction. From now on, she's my sister. Give your people the heads up. Mess with her and you'll have to answer to me. Mu the sixth was shocked. Feng Wu, as in the Feng Wu. Mu the sixth was a hopeless student and had the natural veneration for a straight-A student. He patted his chest. Miss Feng Wu, come to me if you need anything. Brother Feng's sister is as good as my own. Go away. Feng Sun, who had been acting all defiant with Lady Northern Feng, pushed Mu the sixth out of the way. Since when is my sister yours? Get your own sister. After shouting at Mu the sixth, Feng Sun turned to stare at Lady Northern Feng. Why is Boss June her cousin now? A cousin was as good as a half-brother, little Feng Wu was his sister and his alone. He wouldn't let anyone change that. Lady Northern Feng rolled her eyes. Weren't you against having a sister, and made a big scene out of it? What? She's your treasure now? You want to have her all to yourself? That's right. Look how pretty your sister is. Of course. Feng Sun's sister has to be nothing but pretty. She's still so young, and she'll become even more beautiful. There's no doubt of that. Lady Northern Feng asked, so, you're confident that you'll be able to protect her? Are you kidding me? Me, Feng Sun, can't protect my own sister. Mum, how can you belittle me like that? Ha! You can't even win against Sua Qinghuan. Are you sure about that? Feng Sun was rendered speechless. A cousin is as good as half a brother. Only with Jun Linyuan as a cousin and you as a brother can Xiao Wu live in peace and enjoy a carefree life. Feng Sun tilted his head. That sounded reasonable. Boss Jun was such an influential patron that if he took Xiao Wu under his wing, no one would dare to pick on her again. Sure. Feng Sun patted Feng Wu on the shoulder. Little sister, don't worry. I'll go to Boss Jun and I'll make him look out for you. Feng Wu. Chapter 730, Cousin? No, that won't be necessary, Feng Wu waved her hands. I'd rather see him as a distant relative and stay out of his way. Who were they kidding? Jun Linyuan was indeed a powerful patron, but she couldn't stand his mood swings. What was more, he specialized in sabotaging her. And he wouldn't stop doing it. The last thing Feng Wu wanted was to get anywhere near him. She had to stay as far away as possible. Don't be shy. Feng Sun held Feng Wu by her shoulder like a real big brother. Come, I'll take you to him. Mu the Sixth watched their interaction with envy. They were going to see the Crown Prince. After following Feng Sun around all these years and calling him boss, Mu the Sixth had only met the Crown Prince a couple of times. And Boss Feng had never mentioned introducing him to Jun Linyuan. But now, Feng Wu would get to see the Crown Prince right away and would be under his protection. Mu the Sixth was so envious that he could cry. However, Feng Wu, no. I'm not going. Feng Wu shook her head repeatedly. Yes, please. Feng Sun tried to drag Feng Wu out with him. No. Feng Wu said affirmatively. It's late and I need to go home. After hearing about the royal family's attitude, Feng Wu didn't want to go anywhere near them. Lady Northern Feng was thinking the same thing. She darted a warning glance at Feng Sun. Aren't you supposed to protect you, sister? What are you doing now? Feng Sun was rendered speechless. Fine. If Feng Wu wouldn't go, he would go by himself. Cousin? Jun Linyuan had been cultivating despite Feng Sun's noisy babbling. Nothing could disturb the Crown Prince, but what the hell was that cousin all about? For the very first time, Jun Linyuan stopped his cultivation because of Feng Sun. Feng Sun mumbled, I didn't want to share my sister with you, but since you're so useful. Fine, you can have half of my sister, but only half. Jun Linyuan found Feng Sun preposterous. Who are you talking about? Feng Wu, of course, Feng Sun said matter-of-factly. Little Feng Wu is my sister now and that makes you her cousin. That's as good as half a brother. Jun Linyuan almost rolled his eyes at Feng Sun. He didn't want to be a half-brother. That sounded as idiotic as Feng Sun. Feng Sun went on babbling. But I'm still closer to her. I'm the real brother and you're just her cousin. You're not taking her away from me. Jun Linyuan detected something else from Feng Sun's words. He snorted. Who the hell is her cousin? You're not walking away from this. This came from His Majesty, and my sister was told to address you as cousin, Feng Sun gloated. I know you hate your female cousins, but my sister is a different story. You can't hate her. From His Majesty himself? Interesting. Jun Linyuan darted a look at Feng. Feng nodded and left right away. Jun Linyuan didn't hear anything Feng Sun said after that, and he kept repeating that sentence in his head. This came from His Majesty, and my sister was told to address you as cousin. Since when was His Majesty so nosy? Jun Linyuan narrowed his eyes. It was his habit to stay 7 or 8 steps ahead. He could always find the key information as soon as other people stopped talking. From there, he would soon get to the bottom of everything. Feng returned shortly afterward and whispered something in Jun Linyuan's ear. Then, Feng Sun saw Boss Jun, who never let any emotion show, flare up. His eyes were as cold as winter. Chapter 731, Stay as far away as possible, got it? Feng Sun's eyes widened. What was going on? Was Boss Jun that against little Feng Wu? That was it. Feng Sun smacked his own thigh. He had been so pleased with the outcome that he had gotten carried away and forgotten something very important. Boss Jun found the notion of female cousins repulsive and had never liked little Feng Wu to begin with. Now that those two factors were combined, it would take a miracle for him to warm up to the idea. Boss Jun. Before Feng Sun could say another word, Jun Linyuan abruptly rose to his feet. One look at Boss Jun's face and Feng Sun knew something was terribly wrong. The guy was very mad. Jun Linyuan said nothing and marched off right away. Beat Boss Jun, where are you going? The Feng clan. The succinct answer gave Feng Sun the chills. Was Boss Jun going to beat little Feng Wu up? Feng Sun was exasperated. He quickly followed Jun Linyuan out and tried to talk the crown prince out of it. Boss Jun, actually. It was His Majesty's idea. He ordered my sister to call you cousin. My sister didn't want to do it. Boss Jun, if you want to hit someone, hit me. Please don't hit my sister. My sister is. My sister. Jun Linyuan glared at Feng Sun. Feng Sun returned his glare with an innocent look. With a livid face, the crown prince marched off. In the Feng manner, Xiao Wu, you're back. These days, Chaoga was staying with Feng Wu. According to her, the Duan family was the last place on earth she wanted to be. Feng Wu poked Feng Tutu's plump belly with a finger. The cub had just had its meal and was lying there on its back. Was it just her, or had Feng Tutu gained weight again? Playing with the cub, Feng Wu turned to Chaoga with a smile. Anything new? Yes. Yes, of course. Did you know? Your brother is a genius. Chaoga said in amazement. How long has it been since he started cultivating? He's already a level 5 spiritual master. A level 5. Feng Wu said, not bad. And there's Uncle Chiu. Did you know? He made it to the spiritual grandmaster stage today. Just like that. Feng Wu rubbed Feng Tutu's belly. Good. How about you? Ha, I made a breakthrough today as well. I'm also a spiritual grandmaster now. Chaoga was over the moon. Before Xiao Wu came back, Chaoga's cultivation performance had been miserable. Not only couldn't she make any progress, she had deteriorated until she was a mere level 5 spiritual master. But within a month of meeting Xiao Wu again, she had become a spiritual grandmaster. She felt like a new person. Chaoga asked earnestly, Xiao Wu, Lady Northern Feng seemed rather hesitant when she came to pick you up. Where did you go? Is everything all right? I went to the Imperial Palace. The Empress Dowager fell ill and I happened to be around, so I helped her, Feng Wu said casually. You saved Her Majesty? Xiao Wu, you're the Empress Dowager's savior. Chaoga was elated. His Majesty is the most filial son. Saving Her Majesty is such a big deal. The royal family must adore you now. Feng Wu smiled bitterly. Adore me? I'm already on the blacklist. The Emperor and Empress Dowager were so alarmed, as if she actually wanted to marry Jun Linyuan. Seriously? But why? Xiaoge was confused. Feng Wu said in a serious tone, all you need to know is that from now on, we have to stay as far away as possible from the imperial palace, the Empress Dowager, His Majesty, and the Crown Prince. Got it? Not really. Feng Wu said, you don't need to understand it. Just do as I say. All right. Crack, there was the sound of something breaking apart outside. It sounded like the wall. Chapter 732, That's Outrageous. Feng Sun stared at Boss Jun from behind him in amazement. He then shifted his gaze to the top half of the wall, which was no longer there. Had Boss Jun kicked it that hard? Feng Wu rushed out of the courtyard at that moment, and the first thing she saw was the damaged wall. It had been shattered once the other day, and had just been fixed. And it happened again. Feng Wu looked up and spotted Jun Linyuan. The Crown Prince was staring at Feng Wu with a nasty look in his eyes. Feng Wu then saw Feng Sun next to the guy, mouthing at her, greet your cousin, cousin. The most important quality of a sycophant was to be glib-tongued, right? Feng Wu had been about to snap at Jun Linyuan at first. What had her wall done to him? However, Feng Sun's reaction reminded her. Feng Wu took a step back, then another, and another. When she felt that she was far away enough, she bobbed Jun Linyuan a curtsy like a genteel noble lady. Cousin, to what do I owe this honor? Jun Linyuan's face was so dark that he looked like a charred cooking pan. Feng Wu's beautiful mother had carefully made her up before Feng Wu left for the imperial palace. She wore a soft white dress, which was paired with a rose-colored long top that was decorated with cherry blossoms. The outfit emphasized her long slender neck and set off her fair skin. She looked so demure and comely. However, Jun Linyuan only glared at her. 1, 2, 3 steps. Exactly how far away did she want to get from him? As soon as Jun Linyuan got mad, the temperature around him dropped. Xiaoge wanted to step outside, but as soon as she spotted Jun Linyuan, she was intimidated, which was very unlike her usual emboldened self. She then snuck back to her room like a scared kitten. Feng Wu stood back up after greeting Jun Linyuan. She relaxed her facial muscles, looked into the empty air, then smiled mildly. Cousin, welcome. Feng Xiaoqi, come out and keep our guest company. Feng Wu took another 2 steps back after that, moving further away from Jun Linyuan. Huh? What? Feng Xiaoqi was dumbfounded. Keep the guest company? He was just a kid. Since when was that his job? Plus, the Crown Prince looked so scary. Feng Xiaoqi didn't want to get anywhere near him. He wanted to run away. Feng Wu smiled at Jun Linyuan, then grabbed Feng Xiaoqi by his collar and whispered, you're the only man in the family. It's your duty. But, sister, what about you? Feng Xiaoqi was almost in tears. His Royal Highness was really scary. That look in his eyes felt like blades on the skin, and Feng Xiaoqi was sure that it could kill. Feng Wu gritted her teeth and forced a smile. Aren't I supposed to be a well-taught noble young lady? I shouldn't show my face to outsiders. After that, Feng Wu turned to go back to her room. Jun Linyuan was bad news. If the royal family learned that he was here to see her, she wouldn't be able to keep her head much longer. However, Feng Wu was only able to take a few steps. Thud! The door to her courtyard shut by itself despite the lack of wind. It happened so suddenly that it almost smashed into Feng Wu's nose. Feng Wu! She wanted to scream so badly. However, Feng Wu remembered the Emperor's warning, and she took a deep breath, then another one. When she turned around, there was a smile on her face, but she ground her teeth as she spoke. Cousin, what do you want? Jun Linyuan snorted. Cousin? Was he a stranger to her now? Jun Linyuan refused to speak. He narrowed his eyes and stared at Feng Wu with a piercing gaze. Feng Wu believed that if Jun Linyuan could shoot bullets with his eyes, she would be riddled with holes already. Thud! Just then, the windows of Feng Wu's home cracked without warning. Feng Wu. Chapter 733, Shut up, brother. The wall, the door, and the windows now. Was Jun Linyuan going to completely demolish her house? Any other day, Feng Wu would have exploded already. However, she could still hear Emperor Wu's authoritative voice in her head. That was a truly scary man. He was as moody as Jun Linyuan, and he really had the license to kill. At that thought, Feng Wu could only take another deep breath and squeeze out a smile as she turned to look at Jun Linyuan. Cousin, how about I keep you company? Jun Linyuan didn't reply, but he looked a little less cross. Taking another deep breath, Feng Wu smiled more brightly. Cousin, please have a seat. I'll go make you some tea. Sister, your brother here needs a cup of tea, too. Feng Sun grinned. Feng Wu threw him a dirty look. Why didn't he stop Jun Linyuan? Feng Sun shrugged. He wanted to, but Boss Jun wasn't someone he could order around. Feng Wu didn't know what to say. What a useless brother she had. Feng Wu eyed Feng Xiaoqi as soon as she walked into the room. Feng Xiaoqi timidly lowered his head. Feng Wu then turned to Chaoga. Chaoga lowered her head as well. Feng Wu turned to look at Qiuling, Granny Zhao, and Uncle Qiu in turn. All three were occupied with some chore, repairing shoes or putting things away. She had never seen them this busy. Is Jun Linyuan that scary? Everyone nodded. Yes. Feng Wu was speechless. She had no choice but to bring out the tea herself. Cousin, please have some tea. Cousin, how do you like the flavor? This is the best tea I have. Cousin, I know it's kind of boring here. Cousin. Cousin, cousin, cousin. With every cousin Feng Wu said, Jun Linyuan's face darkened a little. In the end, his face looked like a stormy sky. Feng Sun felt so cold that his teeth chattered. Hey, what's that smell? Feng Sun strolled to the grape trellis, found a teapot there, poured himself a cup, and downed the tea in one go. Feng Sun hadn't expected the taste. Cough, cough, choking on the tea, Feng Sun coughed violently. Seeing the teapot in Feng Wu's hand, Feng Wu panicked and began to dart warning glances at Feng Sun. But Feng Sun didn't get the hint. As soon as he stopped coughing, he yelled, Little Feng Wu, why do you have Cining tea here? What Cining tea? You're mistaken. Feng Wu snatched the teapot out of his hand. Feng Sun wouldn't be convinced and he stared at Feng Wu. Sister, this really is Cining tea. Are you blind or what? The tea you offered Boss Jun was dragon leaf, a famous tea, but that's nothing compared with the Cining tea here. Feng Wu was speechless. Brother, please shut up. Seeing that Feng Wu wouldn't reply, Feng Sun thought that he hadn't convinced Feng Wu. He added in a more affirmative tone, This is Cining tea, I'm sure of it. I had the honor of being offered a cup by Master Ling Hu of Wandering Temple. Just trust your brother. Feng Wu seethed with anger. Of course she knew it was Cining tea. She had made it herself. She had given dragon leaf to Jun Linyuan because she didn't want to waste her Cining tea. That Feng Sun had ruined her plan. Seeing the look on Feng Wu's face, Feng Sun thought that she didn't believe him. He poured another cup and handed it to Jun Linyuan. Boss Jun, try it. It's really Cining tea. Chapter 734, Where is His Majesty? Feng Wu stepped on Feng Sun's foot with all her strength. What kind of brother was he? What he said would confirm that she deliberately hadn't offered the crown prince the best tea she had. That Boss Jun was the most mean-spirited man and he would harbor so much bitter resentment over what she did. But Feng Sun knew none of that and he pressed on. Boss Jun, am I right? It's Cining tea, isn't it? Don't you drink it all the time when you visit Wandering Temple? Where is this Wandering Temple, and what's Cining tea? Feng Wu couldn't look more innocent. Wandering Temple is run by Master Ling Hu and he makes the best Cining tea. Even His Majesty goes there every now and then just for the tea. Master Linghu's Cining tea is so hard to come by. I've only tried it once and it tasted exactly like this. Despite the smile on Feng Wu's face, she was shouting in her head. She wanted to hit someone. Feng Sun went on, Master Linghu is so stingy. Boss Jun is welcomed inside whenever he visits, and I have to wait in the porter's lodge, and get bitten by mosquitoes. I'm rarely allowed inside, sob. The more Feng Sun said, the more pitiful he sounded. Xiao Wu, the way you call Boss Jun cousin. Why does it give me the creeps? Do you want to call him brother instead? Feng Wu and Jun Linyuan glared at Feng Sun in unison. Feng Wu, like hell. Jun Linyuan, no way. Feng Sun blinked. Why are you both staring at me? That's so scary. Over on the side, Feng glanced at young Lord Feng and shook his head. He then looked at his young master, who was glowering at Feng Wu, and shook his head again. All of a sudden, Jun Linyuan rose to his feet. Feng Wu was delighted. See you around, cousin. That cheerful tone. Jun Linyuan took a deep breath and glared at Feng Wu. I dare you to call me cousin again. Feng Wu bit her lower lip. I'm only following His Majesty's order. He had finally suppressed his anger, and now, he flared up again. Boss Jun, where are you going? Feng Sun wanted to follow him out, but Feng shook his head at him. His Royal Highness is going back to the palace. Feng dropped a hint. Feng Sun was bewildered. Feng, how do you know that? Feng thought, and I know that His Majesty is going to be in so much trouble. Of course he couldn't say that aloud, as that would be demeaning the Emperor's authority. The Imperial Palace, the Imperial Study. Your Royal Highness. Seeing the Crown Prince march into the study with a stern face, the eunuch on duty dropped to his knees, utterly frightened. Jun Linyuan scanned the room with his eyes after he walked in. There was no warmth in them. The eunuch felt a chill run down his spine and he shivered like a leaf in the wind. His Royal Highness was so terrifying. When he lost his temper, he was scarier than His Majesty. At that thought, the eunuch kept very still and didn't dare move a muscle. Where is His Majesty? Jun Linyuan's cold voice seemed to freeze the air. His Majesty has gone to Cining Palace, the eunuch replied in a shaky voice. He was too scared to look up. One wrong move and he could turn into a dead body. Jun Linyuan turned to leave. The moment he turned, he spotted something on the table which made him pause, and he changed directions. When the eunuch saw Jun Linyuan pick up the item, he thought his blood had turned to ice. Why, Your Royal Highness, despite his fear, the eunuch had to speak up in front of the Crown Prince. He was the one who was organizing this thing to be sent out according to His Majesty's order. Chapter 735, You Brat. Jun Linyuan grabbed the thing on the table and tossed it to Feng. Why, Your Royal Highness, the eunuch was almost in tears. He would be hung if the Crown Prince took it away. Jun Linyuan glanced at him. His Majesty is going to award the princes with Cining tea leaves that Master Linghu sent. People would die if Jun Linyuan took it away just like this. Show me the list. Jun Linyuan smirked. Of course the eunuch couldn't say no to Jun Linyuan, and he took the list out of his chest pocket. After reading the list, the smirk on Jun Linyuan's face grew even colder. Putting away the list, he turned to leave. Your Royal Highness. The eunuch was really crying from fear now. Jun Linyuan headed for Cining Palace straight away. Cining Palace. The Empress Dowager was sleeping, and being a considerate son, the Emperor didn't trust anyone else to make her herbal medicine. Right now, he was watching the fire as the concoction bubbled in a pot. Jun Linyuan showed up at that moment. The temperature inside Cining Palace plummeted as soon as he walked in. What was more, Emperor Wu was fanning the stove, and the fire almost went out from the sudden drop in temperature. Emperor Wu snapped, Who's there? He looked up and saw Jun Linyuan, who looked furious as he started to raise a storm in the room. Wrapped in his luxurious fur cape, the crown prince cut a dashing figure. The moment he stepped inside, he fixed his unblinking gaze on Emperor Wu. It was as if a young wolf was challenging the pack leader. Emperor Wu lost his temper right away. After all the effort he had put in, he had to watch it all go to waste because the fire had died. Rising to his feet, he stared at Jun Linyuan coldly and frowned. Jun Linyuan, what are you doing? Jun Linyuan only smirked, but didn't say a word. Emperor Wu flared up and gestured at the stove. Do you realize that your grandmother is counting on that medicine? And you put out the fire just like that. What did you do that for? Emperor Wu had always maintained a casual manner in Cining Palace, for the Empress Dowager didn't like him to be too formal here. Jun Linyuan stared at Emperor Wu with eyes as deep as bottomless pits. Anger flickered in them. Emperor Wu snorted. So, it's because of me. Tell me now. What did I do? Because of Jun Linyuan's great talent, Emperor Wu found it hard to retain his majesty around Jun Linyuan, for the latter never viewed him in that light. Jun Linyuan smirked. You know damn well what you did. Emperor Wu's face turned livid and he pointed a shaking finger at Jun Linyuan. Watch your language. Do you even know who you're talking to? I can kill you for speaking to me like that. Emperor Wu shook with anger. He was Jun Linyuan's father at least, if not his emperor. This brat. All the other princes are so obedient and filial. What did I do to deserve you? You're treacherous. Jun Linyuan snorted. They're like pugs wagging their tails for attention. What else have they got? You, Emperor Wu almost had a heart attack. You brat. How can you say such things about your brothers? You. He raised a hand to slap Jun Linyuan. All his subjects showed him their ruler, veneration, apart from this brat. However, just then the Empress Dowager, who had been sleeping on the couch, was woken up by the noise. Chapter 736, Baby Jun. Hearing Jun Linyuan's voice, the old lady threw a robe over her shoulders before hurrying out, too quick for Granny Lan to stop her. The old lady blanched when she saw what was going on. Despite still being a patient, the Empress Dowager jumped at Emperor Wu like a tiger and smacked him on the head. What do you think you're doing? That was a very hard strike. Even Emperor Wu was a little disoriented from the smack. Mother. Like a mother hen, the Empress Dowager shielded Jun Linyuan with her arms spread open as she glared at Emperor Wu. You! What are you doing? How dare you mistreat my little Junjun? Emperor Wu was frustrated. Mother, this brat needs to be disciplined. He's so unruly. He has no respect for me. The Empress Dowager was furious. My little Junjun is the most reasonable kid in the world. He would never disrespect you for no reason. You must have done something first to set him off. Emperor Wu sighed in resignation. Last time he checked, he was the Empress Dowager's son, but the old lady took Jun Linyuan's side all the time. At that thought, Emperor Wu glared at Jun Linyuan. The Empress Dowager flared up. Stop giving him dirty looks. It's your fault, just admit it. Emperor Wu felt so helpless. Mother, you have to stop mollycoddling him. Look at how spoiled he's become. His mother scoffed at him. There's nothing wrong with my little Junjun. He's talented, he's a great cultivator, and he has a noble character. He's my most beloved kid. He's the best. How is he spoiled? Answer me. Emperor Wu took a deep breath and clenched his fists. The Empress Dowager went on. Why shouldn't I dote on little Junjun? What do you mean, he's spoiled? Tell me this, can you find a more extraordinary boy of his age on this continent? Emperor Wu was speechless. The answer to that question was obvious. Junjun is so wonderful, but you still abandoned him when he was little. He's been through so much, and he only survived by sheer luck. Otherwise, I would be visiting his grave already. Tears welled up in her eyes as the Empress Dowager recalled the past. Emperor Wu looked embarrassed. But the Empress Dowager wouldn't stop there. My poor Junjun. He lost his mother as a baby and his father never liked him. He's still abusing the boy. Emperor Wu's mouth fell open. The boy would be living in misery if he hadn't worked so hard to defend himself. Junjun, what have you done to deserve such a father? Emperor Wu couldn't take it anymore. But he swears at his own father. Don't make excuses. It's all your fault. Emperor Wu didn't know what to say. What happened to unconditional maternal love? The Empress Dowager was treating him like a stranger. The Emperor had no authority whatsoever when his mother was around. The Empress Dowager ignored Emperor Wu's hurt feelings. She held Jun Linyuan's hand and asked in a concerned tone, Baby Jun, what did he do to you? Baby Jun. Stop using that name already. This baby was already one of the most capable cultivators on this continent. Emperor Wu shuddered as well when he heard his mother use that pet name on Jun Linyuan. This brat was such an aloof kid that Emperor Wu believed that he would never air his grievances. But Jun Linyuan actually gave an answer.